The young boy gazed in awe at the enormous dragon, its powerful maw unleashing a thunderous roar that shook the air. His heart pounded, unable to tear his gaze away from this majestic creature, as if for the first time he had seen power itself embodied in living form. Meanwhile, Telia, with cold determination, inquired how effective the magic sword would be against such an opponent. After a brief exchange of glances, she confidently raised the blade, declaring herself ready to begin, the glint of steel reflected in her eyes. Cain watched as the massive monster crashed to the ground, kicking up clouds of dust. He frowned in surprise, as if he couldn't believe it was over so quickly, then composed himself and said a calm, "Okay," signaling his readiness to face the next danger. Suddenly, the man shouted in alarm for everyone to duck and swung his bat, fending off the invisible threat. The girl screamed and reached out to him, while in the distance, the crowd reacted in horror to a scream coming from the illuminated building in the night. After that, he turned abruptly to his two companions and ordered them to flee, preparing to divert the approaching threat. His steps were determined, his voice firm. He intended to buy them time, even at the cost of his own safety. Later, the boy woke up in a huge bed under silk sheets and, looking around, asked in confusion where he was. Nearby, a maid was carrying a stack of fresh linens and was startled by the unexpected question. Not expecting the child to wake up, Millie joyfully rushed to Cain, hugging him with relief, as if she'd lifted a heavy burden of anxiety. He froze in confusion, but soon noticed a strange mark on his forearm that he'd never seen before, and his surprise gave way to wariness. Later, Cain woke again, crying out from a sudden pain in his side. The maid standing nearby quickly apologized, explaining that she was simply overjoyed at his return to consciousness. He rose and, looking in the mirror, felt something change in his appearance. Meanwhile, two children and a maid froze in front of an ancient portrait, whose eyes seemed to follow their every movement. One child asked who Cain was, and the woman repeated the question, pointing to the figure depicted, as if recognizing its familiar features. Millie placed her hand on the worried boy's shoulder, reassuring him that Sylvia would help him regain his strength. She quietly added that after the high fever and a week of sleep, his memory might have become clouded. Their fingers interlocked, a promise not to let go. Sometime later, a young man named Kanzuya wondered why everyone called him Kain and realized he might have been reincarnated. He realized he was not in a hospital room, but in a spacious house, where a caring maid was looking after him. He recalled his own death and the missed chance to save someone dear to him, after which he firmly resolved not to repeat his previous mistakes. The maid cheerfully encouraged him, suggesting he quickly settle into his new surroundings and start his life anew. Now Cain realized he was the third son of a noble family ruling the lands of Gracia. Everything around him, from his clothes to his speech, seemed alien, yet at the same time enticingly new, like a world opening up anew after a long slumber. Gradually, the story revealed the structure of this world, where a strict class hierarchy existed. Cain's family belonged to the upper class, which was easily discernible by the expensive furniture, gilded frames, and rich fabrics that adorned the rooms. One day, the boy, looking out the window at the gardens beyond the balcony bars, curiously asked Sylvia when he would be allowed outside. His voice sounded impatient, as if he was already longing to see the world beyond the mansion. Millie cheerfully supported the idea, but then warned him with a smile that he shouldn't go out alone. She mentioned a demonic forest nearby, where the reckless sometimes wandered, and not everyone returned. The maid explained that only skilled warriors or wizards could survive in places where monsters reign. She advised the boy to become a mage so that he could one day cleanse the land of the creatures that threatened humanity. Fired by the idea, he excitedly declared that he wanted to try magic right away. However, his mentor gently explained that he would have to wait another 2 years, as his age did not yet allow him to control mana. Later, the girl explained in detail that at age 5, he would be taken to a temple, where divine power would awaken in him the ability to perceive his own status. After that, training in various forms of magic would begin, depending on the gift he had discovered. But the boy found it difficult to accept the wait. He clenched his fists and confidently declared that he wasn't going to wait another 2 years, feeling as if there was another path somewhere that would allow him to touch magic even now. 2 years later, on his 5th birthday, the boy stood by an open window in a spacious and exquisitely decorated building. Light petals drifted through the opening, swirling in the air, and he watched thoughtfully as they were carried away by the wind, feeling a sense of anticipation for change. Meanwhile, Sylvia gently asked if he was ready to go out. Cain nodded confidently, his eyes shining with determination, as if he had already mentally taken the first step beyond the threshold of his familiar world. Millie noticed that Cain looked especially happy, and the maid confirmed her observation. Then the boy joyfully declared that this was the day he had been looking forward to most of all, the day when he would finally be able to see his status. A little later, the young woman apologized to her father for being late as she descended the wide staircase. A man stood calmly and confidently at the bottom, and next to him, a woman with a welcoming smile, creating a sense of solemnity in the moment. Sarah proudly praised Cain, noting that he was impeccably dressed and hadn't made a single mistake. She affectionately called him her child, but he blushed and waved his hands hastily, denying it with a touch of awkwardness. At that very moment, his older sister ran up behind him and, laughing merrily, hugged him tightly, admiring how cute he looked. Behind her, the two adults exchanged glances, reminding the girl not to overdo it in her outburst. As the carriage pulled up to the entrance, Cain thanked everyone who had seen him off. Then, his eyes shining, he stepped inside, knowing that today would be his first true journey into the outside world and his encounter with his destiny. The carriage rolled smoothly down the road, and Telia, looking out the window, asked what the status screen looked like. After a brief pause, she offered to show hers, and a translucent panel, seemingly woven from light, appeared before them. The name of Rain Von Silford, a 7-year-old girl, appeared on the screen, along with a list of her titles and skills. The list included wind, water, fire, and life magic, all at the first level, which evoked genuine admiration from the onlookers. Telia calmly explained to Cain that if he said, "Status open," others would be able to see it, but if he simply said "status," the information would remain hidden. He noted with interest how remarkably similar this was to the mechanics of video games from his past. The girl mischievously joked about Cain's strange title, causing him to nervously avert his gaze and deny it. Then, forgetting the joke, she cheerfully added that he could control 3 types of magic, which left him deeply impressed. The man sitting next to him explained that magic levels range from 1 to 5 and increase through practice and constant use. The 2 girls listened attentively, and one of them dreamily wondered if Rain would ever become a court mage. The same man explained that Sarah had once been an adventurer with a knack for spells, and that a girl standing nearby had encouraged her friend to study magic harder. Cain only smiled to himself, knowing even then that he was capable of harnessing the power hidden within him. Several months had passed since his rebirth, and the boy stood on the stairs of a vast library, amazed by the number of books reaching all the way to the ceiling. This world, full of knowledge, beckoned him with possibilities. He found a tome titled Introduction to Magic, and wondered if he could master witchcraft before his time. Curiosity overcame caution, and he firmly decided to give it a try, despite all the prohibitions. Delving into his reading, the boy tried to understand how exactly the spells were performed. An image of a confident mentor appeared in his mind, explaining how to concentrate, feel the flow of mana, and direct it from the heart to the fingertips. Afterwards, he began to think that he should first learn control before practicing in secret. Sitting down on the floor and taking a sip from the bottle, Cain chuckled and admitted that perhaps he had been hasty in his pursuit. But impatience got the better of him. He decided to skip the section on control and move straight to practice. With each practice, he felt his control of magic grow more confident, and he promised himself to perfect the skill by his 5th birthday. He trained in secret for 2 years, mastering all 4 elements and even high-level destructive spells. However, to avoid arousing suspicion, he never revealed his true strength. Now, looking at the temple visible outside the carriage window, the young man felt a thrill of excitement. He realized with delight that he would soon be able to see the fruits of his efforts, and a girl nearby called out to him, reminding him that the most important test was approaching. In the spacious cathedral, bathed in the soft light of stained glass windows, the priest offered a prayer to the gods, asking for a blessing for Cain. The young man knelt at the altar, his heart pounding, and anxiously wondered what his status would be after the ceremony. Meanwhile, Telia watched intently, expecting a miracle to happen. However, the moments passed, and nothing happened. She frowned, wondering thoughtfully if this was all that was supposed to happen. Later, the entire group, Gain, Sylvia, and the rest, gathered around a large round table. The atmosphere was tense until someone mentioned they'd been waiting a long time for Cain von Silford's arrival, pronouncing his name with particular reverence. The gray-haired man suggested calling the young man Kanzuya Shina, which genuinely surprised him. He froze, unable to understand how anyone knew his former name, and looked from one face to the other in confusion. Cain tried to explain that he had been reborn, but still wanted to know how they knew his true identity. The older man raised his voice sharply, demanding attention, promising to tell him everything if the young man stopped interrupting. Then the bearded old man introduced himself as Xenom, the god of creation of this world. A nearby figure in a silver robe gently added that answers would be given if he would be patient and simply listen. Gradually, Cain realized he was standing before the deities themselves, and he couldn't contain his inner delight. The god calmly remarked that his case was special, and the young man, stunned, heard a quiet voice in his head, as if from within his consciousness. After a pause, the elder addressed him again, asking if he wished to know why he had been reborn into this world. He then asked the goddess named Lime to explain the situation, and she nodded silently. A calm woman with a radiant aura introduced herself as a goddess who governs the cycle of life and death. She offered to explain everything in simple terms, understanding how many questions were brewing in the listener's mind. The hovering spirit emitted a soft glow, telling him that Cain should not have died in that incident. His soul, left without a body, was transported to a new world, beyond the earthly cycle of life and death. The youth frowned, wondering what it meant to be outside the earthly cycle. Then the deity reminded him that before his death, he had shielded his friends from their attacker, thereby disrupting the natural course of fate. He admitted that things hadn't gone according to plan, and the price for that act had been high. Another deity added that after the stabbing, 2 passers-by apprehended the criminal, preventing further bloodshed. Horror gradually appeared on Cain's face. He realized he had died in vain, for those for whom he had given his life would have lived even without his sacrifice. This realization gripped him with an icy feeling of emptiness. However, the goddess gently touched his shoulder and urged him not to despair, assuring him that his new life would find meaning. On the balcony, the standing figure remarked with a slight smile that the chosen method of rebirth seemed a bit excessive. Cain wondered how, despite everything that had happened, the memory of his past life remained with him. The woman, with her eyes closed, approvingly said that his death had not been in vain and that his valiant act was worthy of respect. The cloaked figure explained that the memory retention was intentional, to ease the transition to a new life. Cain was surprised by this admission, and then the woman quietly apologized, admitting that the memory was originally supposed to return only in year 5. The god with the star-crowned crown added that for him, preserving the boy's memory was not just a decision, but something personal. He also hinted at another, far more important reason for this choice. A bearded elder joined the conversation, explaining that their world's development was lagging far behind. He asked Cain to use the knowledge of his past to help civilizations achieve progress and balance. The young man, stunned by the scale of the request, asked doubtfully if they were really talking about the entire world. His gaze flickered, betraying a mixture of anxiety and bewilderment at such a monumental task. The elder, with a kind smile, assured him he was free to refuse if he didn't want to. Cain clenched his fists, feeling how the dream of the magical world he'd always wanted to live in was now intertwined with the request of the gods themselves, becoming a test of his destiny. An elderly man with a beard expresses approval and blessing, saying that the strength may come in handy one day, looking at a distant castle surrounded by mountains. The group exchanges blessings and words of gratitude. One man wishes for strength, another for magic, and the rest respond with warmth, creating an atmosphere of support and hope. The older man advises the young man to use his power wisely, and he listens carefully to his words. The older man reminds the younger man to check his blessing upon his return, and the younger man confidently replies that it should be sufficient. The old man tells Cain that it is time to end this, and Cain, extending his hand, replies that they will meet again someday, despite the circumstances. A young man yawns as he sits on a bench, then reflects on how he hastily agreed to the deity's request and now doesn't know where to begin, looking at his palm and wondering what blessings he has received. The blonde boy sits quietly as a detailed profile is displayed in front of him, listing his extraordinary magical abilities, blessings, and titles, highlighting his giftedness despite his young age. Telia sits on the wide canopy bed, stunned, wondering when she managed to receive the title of Apostle of God, and her expression gradually changes from surprise to irritation. The man explains that magic and skill levels range from 1 to 5, but here all the stats are at 10, an abnormally high level, while the screen displays a character with maximum magic stats. Telia, sitting on the bed, explains that their family has a tradition of showing their status at dinner on their 5th birthday, and curiously notices something unusual. Cain realizes that the creation magic he has just received will allow him to hide his own status, as the spell's description confirms. The young man concentrated on practicing the new magic, thinking that he was learning the creation magic called status concealment, and looked at the magic text with determination. The young man joyfully notices significant changes on the transparent screen. Then, with relief, thanks the god of creation and, feeling confident, sits down on the bed, considering himself ready for the evening. At the dinner table, a man asks if everyone is here, raises his glass and congratulates Cain on his 5th birthday, causing a friendly response and a toast from the others. The man asks if they are willing to show their statuses, and the boy enthusiastically agrees, revealing his status and noting that the gods have been generous in their blessings. Everyone silently looks at the indicators that appear above him, and one of them quietly expresses bewilderment with a short, "Huh." At the table, the young man anxiously asks his father if there is anything strange about his status, explaining that he left blessings, but made sure that none exceeded the 5th level. He cannot believe it when he learns that he has received not only the blessing of the god of creation, but also gifts from 6 other deities. Cain asks Cain with irritation about his excessively high magic stats and 3rd-level blessing from the god of magic, comparing it to a 50th level court mage whose stats are significantly lower. The man confidently declares that with such a status, Cain is guaranteed success in any profession, and he says this with ardent conviction. Cain is anxiously wondering if he should have made his status more similar to Rain's, adjusted his magic power value, or hidden some of his blessings when suddenly someone off-camera addresses him. The man warns the young aristocrat that despite his impressive status, other countries may see him as a threat, and one wrong decision could lead to him being controlled for life, which surprises the young man. The character decides not to make any mistakes while others discuss the upcoming debut party to celebrate the 5th anniversary, mentioning that influential guests from the Gracia territory will be there and advising extreme caution. The boy reflects on the risks associated with his hidden status while doing business, and then admits to himself that he wants to travel the world and gain experience so he can help people without being tied to one place. The young man wonders thoughtfully if the gods understand that too high a status can turn into danger, and a mixture of curiosity and concern is reflected on his face. A week later, the man, with a confident smile, thanks everyone for attending his son Cain's debut party, acknowledging that the guests found time despite their busy schedules. The maid enthusiastically notes how many people have gathered, and the boy quietly agrees. The man explains that Cain is their 3rd son, recently baptized and given special favor by the gods, which is why so many noble guests have arrived. He feels nervous about meeting so many people at the temple, but the girl confidently encourages him, saying that he is a genius and will handle it without any difficulty. The man introduces his son, Cain von Silford, standing confidently at the top of a majestic staircase, while Kane himself looks slightly surprised. Kane steps forward up the stairs, respectfully greeting everyone and thanking them for coming to his debut, asking for guidance from the crowd as the audience listens intently. The fair-haired young man bows politely, expressing his joy at the opportunity to meet everyone on this day. The boy anxiously wonders if he did well, and a man standing next to him praises him for his brilliance and confidence at such a young age and asks the guests to pay attention, causing polite applause. The young character anxiously wonders if he will have to greet the entire long line of people lined up in front of him. The man introduces Kane to Triss, explaining that he commands a fortress on the border between Gracia and the Pisces Empire, and Triss expresses joy at the meeting. The young man notes that Triss looks more like a warrior than an aristocrat, and the older man explains that thanks to his protection, the border remained safe from attacks by the Empire for a long time. The young man notices that the elder is always buried in papers in the mansion, and he introduces himself as Baron Sarai von Maclean, who helps with the paperwork from time to time. The man enthusiastically introduces Matthias, the manager of the treasury of the territory of Gracia, claiming that he is able to get any slave he wants, which makes the young man cautiously think about the meaning of such praise. When the situation finally calms down, the young man sighs with relief, tells his father that he wants to stretch his legs a little, and the father, agreeing, asks him to return soon. Millie notices a girl with cat ears and a tail and remembers that Sylvia once mentioned such races. Kane, amazed, wonders if she is a real cat, while the shy girl stands in the hallway. The girl looks down uncertainly, and the blonde boy leans forward, and she timidly asks if he is lost when they find themselves face to face in the hallway. The girl cries, saying that she doesn't know where her father is, with whom they came together, and the boy tries to console her, suggesting that he probably returned to the main hall, even though it is huge and full of people. The girl happily agrees to search together, and, walking along the long corridor, they introduce themselves, saying their names Palma and Kane. The girl with the cat ears notices them twitching and wants to touch them, while the boy next to him says that he is no longer sad because Kane is wonderful. A crowd is already gathering around the main staircase. The woman anxiously calls out to Palma, but she reassures her that everything is fine. She was just lost, and Kane helped her get back. The woman recognizes the boy as the third son of the Silford family, and he cheerfully introduces himself as Kane von Silford, while the man thanks him for bringing his daughter back. The girl insists that it is impolite to address Kane without a title, but he calmly asks to call him simply by his first name, which surprises the watching man. Kane asks her with a smile if she wants to be his girlfriend, and she happily agrees, admitting that she really likes him, and he secretly thinks that she is incredibly cute. The bespectacled man introduces himself as Sabinos, explaining that he runs a sugar company in the Gracia territory, and thanks both Palma and Kane. The young man says it's time for him to go, adding that it was nice to meet him, and they all wave goodbye to each other in a friendly manner as they leave the building. Kane and the boy are relaxing on the couches after a long day. The boy excitedly tells of meeting a beastman merchant with a very cute daughter, and the girl next to him smiles, sensing his genuine joy. Telia enthusiastically expresses her admiration and desire to learn more about the world while sitting on a chair in a decorated room. The young man enthusiastically tells his father that he wants to become an adventurer, inspired by dreams of the amazing wonders of unknown lands. The boy excitedly declares that he wants to see everything, and the man thoughtfully asks if he prefers the path of an adventurer to other pursuits, explaining that adventurers have the greatest freedom to explore the world beyond the map. Kane and another young man sit in the formal room. The second silently wonders if anyone will oppose their plan. The man talks about the risks of an adventurous life, although some aristocrats also follow it, and tells the boy that he is unlikely to become his successor, advising him to find his own path. The man explains to the young boy that to become an adventurer, one must register with the guild, but since the minimum age is 12, they will find him a mentor to train him. The boy joyfully turns to his father, promising to try his best, and then the scene changes to a view of a majestic building under a clear sky. The boy reacts joyfully, lying in bed, surprised that his father actually allowed him to invite a tutor. He wonders what kind of a tutor he will be, admitting that he knows the theory of magic, but does not wield a sword, while the girl in the witch's hat listens with interest. Against the bright sky in front of the fortress's massive gates, the young man declares decisively that his true training begins right now. The young boy admires the many weapons in the room and turns around to ask if the man standing nearby is Kane. Millie introduces herself and Nina as their mentors, and Kane happily announces that he has turned 5 and is looking forward to starting his training, while a cloaked figure stands silently behind them. Millie tells the cloaked figure to remove her hood when greeting him, and Kane notices that she is an elf, at which point she greets him politely and says she is glad to meet him. Millie reassures the boy, telling him to ignore her bluntness, then explains that she will teach him fencing, and Nina will teach him magic. Kane enthusiastically agrees to begin right away. Millie instructs the boy to practice sword swings under her supervision, and he begins practicing with the wooden sword, performing the movements with concentration, attracting the attention of Millie and the cloaked figure standing nearby. A young boy asks how he did, and the cloaked figure praises him admiringly, while the girl with the tail remarks that she wouldn't give in to a 5-year-old and wonders if he's stronger than Millie herself. Millie confirms her readiness, after which she is offered a training duel to master her defense, and they begin preparations. The young man notes with delight that this is his first real fight. He knows he possesses the blessing of 10th level strength, but he is still inexperienced, and decides to use only 30% of his power. Millie charges forward with her sword, causing Kane to exclaim that her opponent is incredibly fast, while the other girl enthusiastically calls for the fight to begin. Telia explains that her father forbade her to reveal her status, but admits that she received a divine blessing of strength while holding the staff. Gain expresses doubt that a 5-year-old child is capable of wielding such power, after which Sylvia decides to take a break, leaving Millie and Nina to continue their studies. Nina asks if he's ready to start practicing magic and offers to explain what magical energy feels like, but Kane replies that he already knows the basics. The young man enthusiastically explains that he studied magic even before his baptism and reached the basic level, while the cloaked figure is surprised that he trained before the ritual, and the woman with the staff doubts his words. The cloaked figure considers for a moment, then remarks that the ability to master all the elements makes one a sage mage, a level impossible even for court sorcerers. The boy is astonished and turns to Nina. The boy confidently claims that he can cast the water ball spell, and the figure with the staff invites him to demonstrate it. The boy creates a huge ball of water and launches it towards the targets on the castle wall, shouting a spell and commanding it to fly forward. The cloaked figure explains that the first time you use magic, the full spell is required, and that it can only be shortened after much training, and the fair-haired student listens in surprise. The cloaked figure expresses doubt in his teaching abilities as he watches the boy stand confidently next to him and the girl sit on the ground. The teacher believes the boy is already a genius, despite his age. The mentor's papers express concern. If they admit they are incapable of training him, the mission will fail, their rating will decline, and they will lose future orders. However, Kane notes that they have already been paid in advance. Millie sits on the ground, distressed by the destruction on the training ground, and Kane carefully hands her a towel, showing concern for her and the damage done. Millie admits that nothing can surprise her anymore, while Kane anxiously thinks that he may have gone too far, and Gain calmly notes that Kane is no longer just a child prodigy. The young man expressed a desire to leave the city and see what lay beyond their territory, asking if he could be taken with them, as training within the walls was impossible. The girl explained that permission from her father was required to leave the city, but he confidently showed her a sealed letter, stating that he had already received it, which reassured her. Someone was holding a document confirming that Kane had been given permission to leave the city on the condition that he return before sunset and not go too far into the forest. Millie and Kane studied the paper together. Kane noted his father's permission, and Millie agreed that only intermediate-level skills were allowed on the training ground. The girl announced that their next lesson would take place outside the city gates, which excited the boy, who happily confirmed this by raising his hands while the other two watched. The boy delightedly noted the many shops in the bustling city, explaining that he had spent most of his life in a mansion, and the girl teased him that his behavior betrayed his village origins. The group discussed the city's advantages for adventurers, noting its proximity to a demonic forest that provided employment, and mentioning the delicious food and amenities. They discussed the need to stop by the guild before leaving the city, one of them enthusiastically expressing a strong desire to see it. He remembered his father saying that you could only register in the guild from the age of 12, so he didn't expect to see her so early, watching the lively hall where people accepted and handed in quests. Telia explained that these records contained information not found in the mansion's books, including locations for hunting animals and monsters. Millie, a confident girl, walked down a busy city street with a cheerful boy and a hooded figure, while the townspeople went about their business around them. Millie, Kane, and Sylph stood together with excitement. Then they looked up when Sylph announced that they had arrived at the guild building. The group approached the guild building, and the girl teased the boy for being a child despite his strength. He admitted that he was a little nervous, but glad to be here sooner than expected. Someone asked if they were ready to go inside, and another confidently answered yes. Millie enthusiastically pointed out the door to new adventures, while Kane, Sylvia, and another character listened intently behind the counter in the bustling guild hall. Millie approached Rudy with questions, while another girl greeted Millie, and in the background a busy cafe was visible with several people sitting and talking. Millie studied the paper carefully while the other woman explained that she was planning training outside the city walls and wanted to know what kind of monsters were currently lurking nearby. 3 of them carefully studied the document, and one of them explained that recently only horned rabbits and wolves had been seen. There had been no new discoveries. Millie was asked her opinion about the hooded figure, and she replied that it was safe and perfect for the first time, while the boy enthusiastically described the horned rabbits as real monsters, calling it a real adventure. Millie asked cheerfully about the new student, asking who this cute child was and how old he was. Millie cheerfully explained that she was currently training the Lord's child, and Sylph and Kane inquired about monsters suitable for training, causing Millie to react with surprise at their intervention. 3 men sat at a table with food and drinks, one of them grinning and greeting Millie by name, raising his mug. The stocky man asked the woman if she would look after the girl, then invited her to join them for a drink, while the other 2 cheerfully suggested they stay for more fun. The scarred man told Nina that they were working and suggested that she go to a brothel if she needed something else, at which point a wooden mug falls to the floor. Millie struggled to get away, and the other 2 anxiously asked if she would come with them. Then Gain aggressively knocked over the barrel in a tense struggle with the woman. The scarred man mocked the other for disobeying orders, insisting that he should listen to his elders and join them for drinks, while the other nervously confirmed his D rank. The girl struggled as the muscular man grabbed her arm, and the boy thought he had to stop this cliched scene before his workout was ruined. Millie asked the big man to let her go for training, but Kane responded defiantly, questioning why he should listen, then reluctantly agreed that there were no other options. The young fighter deftly blocked a powerful blow from his muscular opponent, who cried out in pain, clutching his injured arm. The muscular man angrily clenched his fist and called the boy a little brat, then declared that he would not hold back just because he was a child. The angry man shouted that an insolent kid like this needed to be educated, and the boy calmly and intently looked up at the approaching fist. The young fighter deftly dodged the powerful blow, then counterattacked with a powerful kick to the back of his opponent, who fell hard to the floor, while the boy remained ready for more. Gain angrily declared that he would not let this go unnoticed, and Millie warned him not to get cocky, while Kane demanded an apology and shouted warnings of possible danger. Kane quickly struck the large opponent in the neck, sending him flying backwards, and Millie urgently screamed for him to stop immediately. The girl was panicking about the mess, afraid of a reprimand from the guildmaster, and the man lying on the floor confidently said that he would leave it to the guildmaster's discretion, surprised that he even existed. Millie shouted at the 2 running boys, demanding that they pay for the table, and Kane's name was heard quietly against the backdrop of the large building. Sylvia gently hugged Telia, who looked at her with gratitude. Then Sylvia thanked her for saving them both with a soft, sincere smile. The hooded character explained that Nina had stood up to them despite her fear, while the other man with a tense expression felt a strong energy. Millie remarked on the other's strength, noting his skill with a sword, magic, and fighting techniques, while someone else complained that the man had wasted a lot of their time. He explained that he had learned martial arts from his family's books, but she doubted that such skills could be acquired solely through reading. The two mentors assured the students that they would protect and teach them, warning that strength alone did not guarantee safety outside the city walls, and the students responded with gratitude. Millie said she would notify the guards and ask the others to wait, after which Kane agreed to go with the hooded figure, preparing to leave the city through the gates. The young character gazed in admiration at the view outside the city, expressing wonder and curiosity about the world beyond the city walls. Millie raved about the delicious food, and Kane explained that the inn where they were staying had prepared their lunch. The hooded figure agreed that the food at the Blue and Silver Eagle was the best. The hooded character offered a cup of water, and the young boy accepted it with a grateful smile, thanking her. Millie explained that she focused on swordsmanship using fire magic and body enhancement, then added that Nina's water magic was especially useful in situations like this. Sylvia commented that Millie was too jockeyed, which angered Millie, and she told her to shut up, while Telia and Sylph watched and thought they complemented each other well. Millie enthusiastically urged them to finish their meal and begin their workout. Kane warned them not to overeat, and everyone expressed gratitude for the food under the clear sky. The hooded character suggested starting with water magic and pointed to a distant boulder, after which the young boy enthusiastically created a water ball and directed it towards the target. The young man created a fireball by casting the fire spell, then moved on to earth magic, launching stone projectiles while the others prepared to attack. Millie confidently stated that beginner-level magic was no problem, then asked to see intermediate-level magic, inviting them to use any type they preferred. The young boy confidently admitted that he knew the theory, but had never tried it in practice in the mansion, preparing to try it for the first time as energy flared around him. Millie created a powerful fire wall spell, surprising Gain and the other character, who quickly prepared to defend themselves. She wondered if he could use such magic, noting that it was abnormal. The story explains that the spell was of an average level, but much stronger than normal, and the boy was only 5 years old. Millie asked if he felt weak or lacking mana, but he assured her that everything was fine. She then called Nina, who calmly confirmed the situation. They spotted a horned rabbit in the grass, and Millie suggested that they hit it with magic since there was only one, to which the boy enthusiastically agreed. The boy was advised not to overdry the skin and meat when selling it to the guild, after which he decided to use wind magic and launched an air projectile. Millie excitedly declared that she had succeeded as the horned creature was startled and fell backwards with a splash. Sylvia praised the spell as impressive for a first time and stronger than usual, and Millie happily said that she wanted to take the trophy to her family, and Kane was allowed to do with it whatever he wanted. Millie showed Kane the magical item, explaining that she was saving up for a magic bag, and he asked with interest what it was, examining the cube. Millie explained that the magic bag works like a chest for ordinary people, allowing them to physically store items using spatial magic, but it requires the blessing of the god of creation. Telia admired the rare item box, feeling special and hoping it would help hide her abilities, then imagined standing out with a magical bag that anyone could buy. The girl with the ponytail asked Nina to find more enemies, and Nina silently offered to determine their location near her. The hooded character cast a search spell, after which the young boy asked Nina about the magic she used, and she explained that the spell detects the mana of monsters at a distance of about 300 meters. The hooded character explained how to distribute mana and sense its power, and the young man nervously tried to follow the instructions, wondering if he was doing it correctly. Kane concentrated on activating his search ability, commanding it to identify nearby enemies. The boy excitedly told Nina that there were 5 monsters nearby, and she wondered how he had been able to determine the exact number of enemies on the first try. Nina gently touched the hooded figure, suggesting they forget the misunderstanding, and then enthusiastically suggested they hunt the monsters Kane had discovered. The boy happily agreed. Millie leaped forward with determination, while Gain, holding his staff, released a powerful energy blast, which the boy tried to stop by putting his hands forward. Millie and Telia sat by the fire while Sylph came up with his staff, handed Millie the meat, and finally everyone agreed that it was time to go back so that her father wouldn't worry. Millie explained that although the city looked huge and the wall blocked the view, they were close to many hostile kingdoms, which helped keep the monsters out of the area. They discussed a massive invasion decades ago with hundreds of monsters, explaining that the city had been rebuilt with a large wall, and one of them promised to find more information back home. The young man sat on his bed, happily recalling the fun day, and then reflected on his progress after defeating several horned rabbits, expecting only a small level increase. Kane excitedly showed off his level increase from 1 to 8, while another person was surprised to read detailed information about Kane's character on the screen. The young man excitedly noted that his MP had exceeded 200,000, while another voice expressed doubt, suggesting a glitch, reminding him that only 10,000 MP was enough for a court mage. The young man realized the significance of his status as a reincarnated being and an apostle of God, understanding the powerful effects bestowed upon him, including brain enhancement and divine communication. The girl explained that the crazy level increase was caused by the effect of the apostle of God, and the boy noticed another multiplier of times 100, which makes leveling up significantly faster and easier. The young man imagined the god's impudent grimace, and then cried out from his bed that he now felt even less human. 3 years have passed since she began training with Millie and Nina, shown through dynamic scenes of intense practice and fire attacks. Telia said thoughtfully that her training would soon be over and she would be lonely without them, sitting at the table with books. The young man considered renewing their contract, while the hooded figure told him he was stronger than both of them, and the woman reminded him that there was little they could teach him anymore. Millie confidently stated that they were adventurers, and the hooded character agreed, expressing a desire to become a real adventurer and no longer be a burden to others. The young man thought about giving a useful gift to the adventurers as a token of gratitude before their departure. Millie was called out by a girl who reminded her that someone was planning to buy a magic bag, and then the boy confidently offered to make the magic bag as a gift, being sure that it would be loved. The young man explained that he had spent 3 years practicing creation magic to create the magic bag, and the screen displayed a list of his new magical skills, including the World Dictionary, teleportation, and compound magic. He suggested consulting the Dictionary of the World for information on materials for magic bags, and then quietly asked for knowledge about his past and present lives. Kane searched for the best material for the magic bag, watching the magic circle as a digital map and search results appeared on the screen. The character decided to go into the forest when it got dark, noting that everything he needed could be found nearby. The young man teleported to his favorite training spot, noting that there must be monsters nearby, thinking about how advanced magic was dangerous, and remembering how lucky he was to be far from the city when he first tried it. Millie asked if she could try advanced magic now, and the tall girl doubted her abilities, but Millie confidently promised to tone it down a bit while the story returned to the events of that time. The man admitted that it was them, and the 3 kneeling men apologized, explaining that the soldiers mistook their actions for an attack and began blockading the city. The young boy stood alone on a large tree stump, thinking about how he was forbidden from using advanced magic because of a past accident, and feeling relieved that no one knew about it. Millie suddenly remembered something and agreed to collect the materials, noting that they should be a little deeper in the forest. The boy was holding a glowing ball, standing on the wolf's head, watching the approaching pack, and suddenly the wolf opened its mouth wide, causing him surprise. After defeating several monsters, 2 girls sat on a hill, one delightedly remarking how impressive it was that an 8-year-old was already much stronger than them, and the other agreeing that the day had gone wonderfully. The hooded figure sadly noted that today was their last day, and then thought that he could teach the boy playing among the leaves nearby nothing more. Millie happily announced the end of the training session, while Kane listened intently and Sylvia stood quietly between them, a glowing cube smoking nearby. Millie told the group that she had a gift for them, then acknowledged the end of the training and apologized for not having taught them much, while Kane listened intently. Kane happily presented a gift in the form of a magical bag, and Telia and Sylvia looked at it with curiosity, trying to understand what it was. Kane happily showed off the piece he'd made, explaining that he'd made it for the band, and someone excitedly asked where he'd found the material. Millie interrupts when Kane reveals that he secretly entered the forest for materials, identifying the red creature as a blood ogre and the green one as an earth dragon. The group discusses how both the blood ogres and earth dragons require an 8-tier party, while someone points out that an 8-year-old boy has already defeated them. Kane explains that his bag, although ordinary in appearance, is enchanted with space-time magic to preserve food, and the girl with her arms crossed doubts that it is suitable for them, while the boy excitedly says that he has practiced a lot. The young man happily explained that he had chosen a volume of 30 cubic meters, as he knew that anything larger would seem ridiculous, and the two women reacted with a mixture of surprise and contemplation. Kane explains that the bag he's been saving up for costs 5 gold pieces for 2 cubic meters, while the others listen with varying reactions. The young man realizes that the small bag has a huge capacity and estimates its value at more than 5 million yen after the conversion, expressing a mixture of surprise and delight. Millie confidently declares that someone definitely deserves the title of national treasure. Kane apologizes for another mistake, and Sylph silently looks at the object in his hands. Millie thanks Kane for the gift, surprised that he remembered her wish for a magic bag, and Kane warns her of the risks of carrying something so valuable and jokingly suggests attacking the owner to get more. Millie warns that the item's weight will increase exponentially if lifted without permission, emphasizing that it is at least a national treasure, while Kane listens intently nearby. Millie and Telia stand confidently when someone asks them to wear something, their expressions determined and ready for action. Millie compliments the outfit, saying it suits another character perfectly, who modestly feels unworthy, but is assured that he fully deserves it. The young man gratefully tells Kane and the girl that thanks to them, he learned a lot outside the mansion, and then asks them to accept his gratitude. The blonde girl looks on in surprise as two others, one on each side, kiss her cheeks, causing her to sweat awkwardly. The boy reacts with surprise, then the two women encourage him to ask them for help at any time and invite him to join their adventures, and he expresses gratitude, and the contract ends. The older man acknowledges Kane's height, while the hooded woman questions the wisdom of giving him the dictionary of the world, noting that he has already mastered space-time magic, and the hooded character addresses the man with respect. The hooded character wonders if they've given him too much power and knowledge, suggesting that he can even create his own magic, to which the other person simply nods in approval. Kane is described as someone who could easily destroy the world thanks to his access to all knowledge from this and previous worlds, low mana consumption, and amazing abilities, but he tends to misuse such power. An older man reflects on the harsh times ahead and Kane's role as a leader, while a hooded figure listens silently, the man enjoying watching Kane use his power. An elderly man with long hair thinks about a young man who has not yet become an adult, but is already the strongest in the country and will soon become the strongest in the world. The young man with the sword explains that after completing his mission, he will have to live there, and warns that he must be careful not to alienate those around him. The boy reflects on the fact that 2 years have passed since then, and he is now 10 years old, while a procession of horsemen and carriages passes by the windows. Telia happily announces that she cannot believe that Kane will also move to the capital, after which she suggests that they take the entrance exam together and attend school. The older man explains that the boy needs to wait 2 more years to enroll, and the woman expresses joy at their good relationship. Then the woman insists that it is her responsibility as a sister to help, and the boy confidently promises to show him everything he has learned. The family travels from Gracia to Esfort, where they will attend the royal school in the capital. The boy expresses excitement at his new life ahead. On the carriage ride, the man reminds Kane that first impressions are important for high nobility, and that he must meet the king upon arrival in the capital, to which Kane agrees. Kane explains that he is using search magic to map the area, while the narration reveals that they are accompanied by their butler Seabass and 10 knights. Garm uses his search ability to visualize the surrounding area, then reports that the city of Renoma is already visible, and the man with dark hair says that they will spend the night there. They stop in various towns on their way to the capital, making sure to greet local lords on the streets. The family enjoys a sumptuous meal together, while the father explains that spending money is their aristocratic duty, contributing to the economy, especially with the support of family. After several days of travel, the group rides by carriage, discussing how each realm reflects the strength of its rulers, and how there are always interesting things to do in every town and village. A young man urgently informs his father about a major battle 3 kilometers ahead, after which the father demands details, while a girl listens worriedly nearby. The man orders soldiers to be sent to help after learning that about 10 people are surrounded by about 10 monsters, and the young man anxiously confirms the situation. The magical energy levels continue to drop, causing the young man to urgently warn that their magical energy is dropping even further, signaling a worsening situation. An older man warns Kane about the dangers of his training, but Kane insists that he will go ahead because they will not make it in time. The young man hesitates, but decides to unleash his power by activating body enhancement and magical wind acceleration in preparation for the upcoming event. The determined boy charges forward as armored riders pursue him, one of whom reacts with surprise to his sudden charge. Kane rushes forward, wondering if he will make it in time, while Telia and Sylph watch with alarm as the furious battle between knights and beast-like opponents nearby rages. The knight desperately fights the 2 boar-like creatures, calling them scum, then quickly prepares to use the air bullets move as the monsters approach. A young man suddenly intervenes, claiming to have come to help, while 2 large boar-like creatures react with surprise and tension as they encounter him. Kane speaks the name of the move with concentration and releases air blades that fly rapidly towards the 3 attacking boars. The boy counts 10 remaining enemies and realizes that using magic is too risky near the soldiers, so he decides to use his sword, preparing to furiously attack the approaching beasts. The boy crouches carefully next to the fallen creature, which suddenly lets out a deafening roar, revealing sharp fangs and a wide-open mouth in a menacing display of power. A young man prepares to strike at a large horned beast, declaring that this will be the last attack, as the creature looms ominously before him. Kane cautiously approaches Telia, asking if she is all right, while the knight warns him to stop and not come any closer, holding his sword pointed at him. Kane tells someone to conserve their strength. Then Kane kneels down and offers to treat the wounds, promising to explain the details later. The armored man notices that his wounds have completely healed, expressing surprise as he looks at his now healthy arms and body. Garm von Silford announces the arrival of additional support from Lord Grace, while another man explains that the spell does not restore lost blood, advising rest and food. Kane notices that the other has just jumped out of a moving carriage and insists on telling him what happened next, to which the other quietly agrees. A dark-haired man explains to a young blonde man that dukes hold the highest position of nobility after the royal family, reassuring the blonde man's safety thanks to his family's symbol. Gain and Kane are surprised to see Telia and Sylvia holding hands, while Gain reassures them that the demons have been defeated and they are now safe. The man kneels and introduces Kana to Silk von Santana, the second daughter of Duke Santana and the third princess of the Kingdom of Esfort, while a young boy nearby exclaims, "Princess." Telia, looking worried, is supported by another girl who calls her name, and the third girl calmly thanks her for her help in such a dangerous situation. The young man apologizes for the horrible sight and politely asks if there is any magic that can help, while the 2 girls look at him with surprise and curiosity. He remembers how hard it was for him to kill monsters in the forest, so he modified the light magic to soften those feelings, then calmly activates the calming aura. A girl with long blonde hair says her hands have stopped shaking, and another agrees, while a young man kneeling nearby notes that this should help. Kane introduces himself as the 3rd son of Garm von Silford and expresses relief that both girls are safe, and they politely ask his name and thank him for saving them. Kane smiles confidently as he stands, while Telia and Sylvia look at him with surprise and confusion among the blooming roses. Telia expresses deep gratitude to Kane for saving her life, holding his hand tightly, and then another woman joins in to also thank him sincerely. Telia excitedly tells Kane that she saw him masterfully use wind magic in conjunction with a sword, and he introduces himself as Silk von Santana. A girl with blonde hair and blue eyes and a girl with light green hair hold the boy's hands, causing him to look on in confusion while a man with dark hair smirks quietly next to him. The man in the formal suit clears his throat nervously, then asks why the Duke's daughter and the princess are together on the street. Telia explains that she and Princess Telestia were traveling from the Malpic region to the capital to attend a social reception. Kane announces that they are also going to the capital and invites the group to join them, expressing his honor if they agree, while the others listen intently. A caravan, accompanied by armored horsemen, moves along a dusty road, and a young man with blonde hair smiles peacefully inside the carriage, enjoying the journey. Telia, Kane and Sylvia sit next to each other on the sofa, all three looking a little tense but trying to smile, creating an atmosphere of polite anticipation. A girl with long blonde hair thinks the seating arrangement is a bit cramped, and a boy suggests moving to another seat so that everyone can be more comfortable. Millie firmly denies anything, then admits that she is still afraid of what happened and feels safe only next to him, and he looks at her with a worried expression on his face. Telia and Sylph hug Kane, expressing their desire to join in, and he notices with a smile that the princess is snuggled up to him. Telia asks Kane to call her Tellies instead of princess, and although he is surprised, he agrees, repeating the name as she insists. Silk cheerfully asks to be called by her first name, and the young man enthusiastically agrees, while from afar someone orders him to stop using formal addresses, which is immediately complied with. Both girls happily encourage the young man, who nervously asks how many days are left on the journey and whether it is possible to get there faster by traveling with a caravan on horses. The guard announces the arrival of the third princess, Telestia, and orders the gates to be opened, while soldiers stand ready at the castle's grand entrance. The carriage waits outside the castle walls, and Kane tells the girls that he will return to her, stating that they are now safe, but one of them asks in surprise what he means. The three sit together. The girl with long hair says that they have already informed his father, and the boy and girl with short hair add with delight that they are going to the castle and will stay that way. The scene shows the knight's headquarters. Then the young man is identified as Kane by an unseen observer. Kane apologizes for the wait, explaining that he was briefed on the situation, then thanks the second-in-command for rescuing the princess and Duke Santana's daughter. The scene shows several wrapped bodies on the ground, with a voice apologizing for the situation and explaining that fallen knights are usually either burned or buried where they fall, and cannot be taken home. Kane praises the knights for their bravery in the face of the orc army without giving in to fear, then thanks another man for using magic to return their bodies to their families. Kane muses that he never imagined his chest of items could be used like this and admits that he couldn't leave the bodies, then promises that the families will be rewarded for their bravery. Kane tries to stop the young man as he prepares to leave, but he remembers that he must deliver him to the king for an audience, showing sudden realization. Kane walks down a luxurious hallway with an older man who compliments his custom-made clothes, and Kane quietly accepts the praise, reflecting on how he doesn't rely on his father for help. The young man was given a basic outline of what to do during the audience by the butler, but he remained uneasy. Then, upon arrival at the castle, he had a formal outfit made to order. Walking down the palace's grand corridor, the boy declares that he will not rely on his father's help, while the older man notes that the clothes were tailored especially for the occasion, and the boy thanks him. The young man recalls the butler explaining the audience procedure while he was nervous, then recalls trying on formal attire upon arriving at the castle to meet the king. He is told that someone will be waiting right there, and he realizes that the king is standing before him as the large doors begin to open, letting in a bright light. The hall is filled with people in formal attire standing in 2 rows, and a young man with blonde hair looks anxiously at the throne where the king and a robed figure sit. Kane walks confidently down the aisle while 2 girls watch in admiration and a man looks on with concern. Then Kane kneels before the crowned figure waiting for him. The king of Esfort orders Kane von Silford to raise his head in a stern and commanding tone. An older man with long hair informs the king that Princess Telia and Silk von Santana were attacked by at least 50 orcs just a few days ago, and the young man listens intently. The crowd reacts with whispers when someone explains that in addition to the regular orcs, there was an orc general who posed an A-class threat. The older man orders everyone to be silent and explains that when the battle was tipping in the orcs' favor, Kane intervened and suppressed the orcs, who outnumbered the knights. The older man explains that after treating the wounded, they brought the dead for proper burial. The king praises Kane's bravery and fighting skills, stating that the reward will be decided by His Majesty, while two young noblewomen note that the princess and Duke Santana's daughter would not be here without Kane's timely arrival. The king awards Kane the title of Baron for his victory, while a stern man watches the scene in the throne room. The young man reacts with shock to being given the title of Baron and the news that he will receive a residence in the capital and 10 pieces of white gold, while several serious men stand behind him. The nobles question the king's decision to provide a home and wealth to a 10-year-old boy, arguing that he is still a minor and uneducated, while the king listens silently next to the girl. A man with curled hair curses under his breath as the king demands respect and a long-haired advisor calls for calm in the tense hall. The king acknowledges the child's bravery in defending those in need, asking who else could have killed so many enemies, including the orc general, as the man and young man listen intently. The king states that Kane, being the third son, has little chance of succeeding his father's position, and sees no problem in granting the title to a child of such abilities. The king firmly states his final decision by ordering someone to take a seat, who obediently responds with dubious confirmation. The king formally addresses Kane, asking for his reaction, and Kane respectfully accepts the generous reward, expressing gratitude while remaining on his knees before the throne. The audience concludes, and it is announced that further details will be discussed later in a private chamber, raising one of the characters' curiosity about meeting the king in person. Kane quietly contemplates his promotion to Baron, marveling at what has just happened, while a stern man with his arms crossed sits nearby, ignoring the tense atmosphere. The man pats the boy warmly on the head, saying that he thought he was still a child, but now he has his own title and will become a worthy aristocrat. The boy listens in silence. A man with dark hair apologizes for waiting for others as he enters a room where a young man and a seated figure with long hair are located. The king thanks Kane for his actions and mentions that Telestia told him everything that happened, with several people sitting attentively around them in the throne room. Kane modestly explains that he helped only because he saw people in trouble, and the man gratefully acknowledges that Kane saved his daughter's life, expressing his gratitude. The young man expresses his gratitude, clarifying that his words come not from the king, but from his parent, and the elderly man in royal robes listens attentively. The man questions the decision to give a 10-year-old child land in the capital, but the crowned figure firmly agrees, prompting the man to move on to the next topic. The king praises the boy's exceptional skill in swordsmanship, magic, and divine protections, declaring that the country will be blessed by him, while two men listen intently nearby. The king explains to the young nobleman that it is unusual for him to receive a title before formal education, and advises him to focus on his studies at school for the next few years. Kane sits, listening as the man in the crown promises to pay for the upkeep of the mansion and advises him to consult his father on matters of noble society, after which he thanks him and agrees. The character reflects on the fact that he has not yet begun formal training, but believes that self-education and knowledge from his past life give him an advantage in a world without magic and advanced technology. He feels relieved that life won't change drastically anytime soon, but then she interrupts him, saying there's a more important matter to discuss. The king addresses Kane, raising the question of his engagement to Telestia and Miss Silk, with a serious man standing nearby. The young man reacts with surprise, and the two girls smile softly. Then the older man explains that the wedding ceremony will only take place after he becomes an adult. The older man calmly announces that for now they will be considered engaged, which shocks the younger man when he realizes he is engaged to two people at once. The young man asks the king about accepting proposals, and the king explains that polygamy is as common in the carriage as in the bedroom. He wonders if it's a carriage or a bedroom, then imagines an unmarried couple holding hands and sleeping in the same room while two girls watch him with attention. Two men, one wearing a crown, the other in formal attire, confront the young man, accusing him of playing with their daughter's feelings, with serious expressions on their faces. The man asks if 10-year-olds will be allowed to make important decisions, and the young man nervously confirms that they will. The two girls express concern about being considerate of others' feelings, and the young man, with a timid but understanding smile, agrees. The king admits that everything went more smoothly than expected, and Telia and Sylph exchange timid but hopeful glances. The older man informs Kane that this is not enough to join the royal family, then explains that Kane will live here, not on his father's territory, and must wait 2 more years before entering school. Kane sits in a chair and listens to 2 girls say that achievements should come to him quickly. But if he is anything like his father, it might not be so. 2 women in wedding dresses discuss how his recent actions could only award him the title of Baron, but since he is going to marry Telestia and Miss Silk, he should be at least an earl. The older man recognizes Kane's potential despite his young age, and the 2 girls enthusiastically express their high expectations, holding his hands and smiling supportively. The Silford family mansion is shown from the outside and inside. Then a young man lies on a bed, sighs deeply and reflects on how he hasn't had time to rest since arriving. Millie suddenly sits up in surprise, explaining that after killing many orcs, his level had probably increased. Kane studies the document with his stats and magical abilities, then comments that the numbers are too high no matter how you look at it. He nervously admits that he wanted to hide his true status until he grew up, but he realizes that faking numbers has its limits, as others have already seen him kill orcs. Kane lies on his bed reading a book and contemplating turning to the gods. Then a maid calls him to dinner and he accepts, preparing for what awaits outside the room. Kane greets Jean, Alec, and Maria, expressing joy at seeing them, while Alec remarks that Kane has been quite busy. The young man with blonde hair admits that they may have met before, while the dark-haired man insists that they actually did, even though the other was too young to remember. Kane interrupts the meeting, apologizing for the interruption and stating that there is something important to discuss first, while the others listen attentively at the table. Kane explains that during his meeting with the king today, he was awarded the title of Baron and also received real estate in the capital as a reward. Millie admires Kane's amazing skills, and Telia expresses confidence that the princess was glad of Kane's presence, and they sit happily together. At the dinner table, the man reveals that Princess Telia and Lady Silk, the Duke's daughter, have been chosen as Kane's brides, emphasizing that the information is top secret. Telia listens quietly as the boy explains, then reflects on how he is only 10 years old, and the man confirms that Kane's rescue was officially recognized as love at first sight. Millie congratulates Kane with a smile, and he looks surprised. She admits that it was bound to happen sooner or later, but expresses bewilderment that it has anything to do with the princess. Kane reflects on his mother's contentment with his status and marriage, while he senses his sister's displeasure, explaining that he will not inherit his father's status. He asked if he was going to live in the new house, to which he received an affirmative answer. Smiling, he noted that then he would be closer to the Rhine. After a family dinner, the first long day in the capital ended, and the 2 young characters happily marveled at the opportunity to now see each other every day. The next day, the woman asks Kane and Rain where they want to go first, reminding them that they need to be in time for dinner, and Kane thinks about the need to clarify his status and decides to turn to the gods. The young man suggests visiting the church first, and the girl enthusiastically agrees, mentioning that this is their first visit to the capital and they have received many blessings for which they should be thankful. The girl asks Seabass to take them to church, the other agrees, and the boy enthusiastically declares that he wants to go clothes shopping afterward. The scene shows a bustling marketplace, with a man enthusiastically picking up an apple. Then a medieval cityscape with a busy street and a carriage is seen, while the narration explains the kingdom's population estimate. A young blonde boy looks out the window of a carriage, beyond which the street of a bustling medieval town leads to a majestic cathedral under a clear sky. Kane walks through an empty chapel, meets a nun inside, and then finds himself in front of a grand altar with statues, gazing at the figure of a bearded man. The older man confirms that it is Kane, expressing surprise that it must be him, while the boy sits quietly and watches. Telia prays quietly in the largest church, hoping it is the best place to reach someone, and a group of figures on thrones respond that they hear her. The young man greets the elder warmly, who expresses relief at his arrival. The woman with long hair suggests that perhaps it never left him, causing him to be surprised. The young man reacts with surprise as the elder explains how to do something, showing flashbacks to the group's cheerful interactions and a girl looking puzzled. The group notes how much interesting has happened since their last meeting, and the older man reassures the younger man that they have been relatively uninvolved, much to his surprise. The young man asks for a little privacy, and the elder calmly replies that they are not angry, but were simply bored while waiting for his arrival. The gods approach Cain, the god of commerce Panam and the god of skills Grim, explaining that time flows more slowly here, to which Cain reacts with surprise and curiosity. Two elderly men discuss how they have been waiting for someone to return for years, lamenting the lack of entertainment and the untapped commercial sector in the world. Cain repeats the word entertainment in surprise, after which the old man asks him to use his knowledge to distribute entertainment products around the world. The scene shows a quiet town with a view of houses and mountains, and a character reflects that the idea of entertainment in this world is very different from his previous one, where people worked until they were tired and only then rested. The older man confidently claims to know a thing or two, while the younger man admits he has only a vague idea and no experience in creating or marketing products to the general public. An older man explains to a young boy that entering into a contract with a trading company and delivering the goods to the altar will allow him to be registered, while two men discuss that contracts can be entered into after entering the church, which causes the boy to question why this is so. The elder explains that registering through him prevents unauthorized copies from being made, warning of the consequences of attempting to violate this. The young man reacts with surprise and politely declines to know what will happen next. The young man reflects on how the process resembles patents from his past life, and the merchant explains that once the goods are registered, production and distribution can be contracted out to a trading company. The young man confidently agrees to ask others after his return. The elder expresses his anticipation, and the young woman thinks that it is now possible to manage the company independently. A young man approaches an elder in religious attire, explaining that he has come to church with an important question. The elder expresses a desire to hear his opinion on the matter. The young man notices that something is getting bigger every time he looks at it and asks about the situation, while the elder muses that he hasn't encountered this before and suggests that the young man might be the strongest person. The older man asks what the young man thinks, calling it fascinating, and the young man is surprised, realizing if he has surpassed human limits after the woman's comment. The elder informs the surprised young man that he has effectively abandoned his humanity and become a demigod, which prompts him to ask what a demigod is. The magnificent dragon-like creature is praised for being almost equal to the ancient dragons and very, very close to their level. The young man reflects on his power, realizing how laughable it is compared to a demigod, while the elder confidently asserts that even a demigod is nothing compared to the real thing. The long-bearded elder tells Cain that no matter how much power he has, he must remember the limits of what he can do alone. The young man agrees to be careful after the old bearded man warns him not to overdo it. An older man with a beard says it's time, and a young man with blonde hair smiles and expresses hope to see him again soon. A girl with blonde hair and a bow eagerly asks Cain what something looks like as the scene cuts to a traditional building from the outside. He says the outfit looks good, after which she offers another dress and promises to wear it soon, while he thinks the situation looks awkward in the luxurious room. Telia excitedly tries to show Cain something. He reacts with curiosity and then offers to look around while she catches her breath outside, relieved that she didn't have to stay there for long. Cain suddenly calls out to Palma, who is dusting nearby, after which a third person playfully asks Palma about her cute little friend. She is surprised and wonders why Cain is in the capital. The girl quickly explains that Cain is a nobleman, causing the cat-eared man to apologize for his rudeness, and Cain calmly replies that there is no need to worry and that he understands. A young man asks to see the store, and a girl with cat ears enthusiastically invites him to look around. A young man with cat ears talks to a girl in an apron about Palma, who lived with him and helped in the store, while an older man with long hair stands nearby. Cain looks at the display of bird figurines and wonders if Tamanis makes them here, then looks closely at one small figurine in his hand with curiosity. The young man confidently suggests that if he could work with wood like this, he could create something else, while the man in the suit expresses pride in their product and the others listen intently. Telia looks determined and calmly states that she has a request. A young man comes up and says he has a question, expressing a desire to create something and asking for help from their company. The young man offers to provide materials and tools, suggesting that Palma can also teach woodworking while the girl watches, and the man with cat ears clarifies that this is not quite what he had in mind. Cain shares his idea for a new business, and after a short pause, Sylvia suggests finding a more suitable place to continue the conversation. Kane sits thoughtfully in the Serican Company reception area, thinking about entertainment and video games, but doubts that he will be able to create a gaming console in this world. Sitting at the table, the young man thinks about something funny for adults and children, then suddenly comes to life, having come up with an idea. The cat-eared woman apologizes to Kane for the wait, and he agrees to discuss his idea of producing entertainment products for children and adults, to which she says it should be simple enough. Telia is surprised to realize that something created for entertainment, not work, actually functions in this world as the hand demonstrates the object's work on the black surface. A man in glasses shows a boy a tablet with mysterious symbols on it, noting that the design is interesting, easy to learn, but difficult to fully master, and believes that it will sell well. Millie expresses joy that another person understands her, and the woman with long hair enthusiastically says that she would be honored to work together on this. They begin to discuss profit sharing. Then the man with cat ears promises to start right away and contact the young man when the first prototype is ready, which inspires him. The man explains the standard profit-sharing contract, detailing Kane's shares, taxes, materials, shipping, and Serican, to which Kane reacts with surprise. The young man assures the pigtailed girl that he will return when the prototype is ready, and promises to review the rules and explain some strategies before leaving her to her work. The young man suddenly remembers something and tells the other to use the object he places on the table, and the man with glasses looks at them with a questioning expression. The wolf-eared man is amazed that the boy has a gold coin, and the boy nervously admits that this might be too much. Kane offers the other man a bag, explaining that it is an investment from the king. He received 10 of them and decided to use them for this purpose. The young man confidently declares that he expects the product to pay for its investment, and the man with cat ears gratefully replies that it will make his work much easier. Millie thanks Kane, who promises to start working on a prototype and let her know when it's ready, after which they part ways on a quiet street. After the sudden creaking of the carriage wheels, Telia reproached Kane for leaving so suddenly, reminding him that she wanted to show him her new outfits, to which he cheerfully replied that he had met a friend and offered to show them later at home. The one riding in the carriage agreed to the proposal, but warned Telia to be ready to see everything they had bought when they returned home. Kane reflected on the fact that he had not clarified to Tamanis that the request came from a god, and hoped that this had not aroused unnecessary suspicion, while the two older men watched him closely. A few moments later, the scene changed. In a bustling market, people were chatting happily. One woman was tenderly holding a baby, and Kane, looking out the window, hoped that what he saw would bring joy to everyone. A week later, he was called to look at the finished prototype, insisting that he quickly evaluate the result. Kane presented a rough design to Millie, who asked what she thought, while a girl with cat ears watched nearby. The young man enthusiastically named the game Reversi, causing delight among the others, and suggested that they try it right away to better understand the rules. The girl explained the simple mechanics. Players take turns placing pieces, trying to capture others' pieces by surrounding them with their own. Kane demonstrated how he flipped over the black piece. The girl asked if it was correct, and the woman explained that the game was called Reversi. The boy remembered playing with his grandfather as a child. During the game, he confidently declared that he would win, but the girl with cat ears conceded defeat, and the woman in glasses carefully counted the chips. Millie cheerfully admitted that she lost, but she enjoyed the game, and Kane silently watched her reaction, thinking about what was happening. The girl excitedly said that the game would become popular, and one of the men offered to register the design with the god of trade and invited them to follow him. Sylvia asked Kane what he was thinking, and he expressed a desire for her to continue developing the game as they walked down the hallway. Sylvia suggested creating 2 versions of the game, one for ordinary people and one for the nobility, explaining that aristocrats do not like overly bright common objects, to which Kane happily agreed. The young man emphasized another important aspect, keeping the price affordable so that everyone can afford the game, emphasizing that the goal is entertainment and widespread distribution. Kane confidently suggested starting with 50 copies for the nobility and 1,000 for mass production, causing bewilderment in the other man, who could not believe such a scale. The man with cat ears thoughtfully counted the coins, explaining that the large silver coin was for aristocrats, while the common one was for the common people, detailing the production costs and the required quantities. He also noted that in his case, he would not be able to purchase sufficient stock for the store, and the man with silver hair and glasses was worried about the large sums that would be difficult for the company to prepare. Kane reassured her that money would not be a problem and promised to provide it himself, surprising everyone with his determination. The man with cat ears called out to Kane, who happily replied that he was happy to help and felt a little awkward that he hadn't done more from the start, since the idea had been his. The young man expressed gratitude and promised to do his best to live up to the others' expectations of fairness as they walked down the hallway discussing the details. The man with cat ears explained that having an altar right in the store speeds up the process since there is no need to go to church, and handed over contracts. One for each and one for the god of commerce. He explained that only the two of them would be able to produce the product after signing, but if nothing was done within 3 years, the contract would expire and anyone would be able to take up production, to which the boy confidently replied that he understood. The man then clarified that the contract must fully comply with the product, and both parties are obligated to fulfill their obligations. He then moved the wooden board across the table. In front of an altar decorated with candles and flowers stood a young boy with a taller companion with a braided ponytail, and the boy decisively declared that he was ready to begin the work. The serious woman gestured with 2 fingers towards the game board, and the surprised young man extended his hand, amazed when the board suddenly glowed with a mysterious light. At the chapel, the young man was informed that the dedication to the god of commerce was complete, and after inspecting the product and registering the contract, he asked for 10 sets to be set aside for the nobility. Kane offered to donate some of the items to the royal family and even allowed the other man to keep one for himself. The surprised man asked who he was, and Kane explained the peculiarities of the family's trade monopoly. Returning home, he was warmly welcomed, and the maid reminded him of the need to order an outfit for the upcoming evening reception, mentioning his father's instructions. The young man remembered that one of the reasons for coming to the capital was to introduce himself to the highest nobility, and with a slight smile he realized that he should not forget about the important goal. On the day of his debut reception in the capital, Kane received a compliment from a man on his clothes, and the girl thanked her father, noting that it was Rain who chose the outfit for her. Telia informed Kane that she had already received magnificent dresses from the king and considered it wasteful to buy new ones just for one party. Then she began to explain the important nuances of debut events. The man said the event was an opportunity to strengthen ties with the king and nobility, and that parents used it to broker political alliances and marriages for promising youth. The young nobleman listened attentively as the elder explained that the event was of utmost importance to the young nobility, especially those who would not inherit the title, emphasizing the vital importance of such meetings. Several nobles noted that after recently being promoted to baron, he now receives the title at a very young age, so many will be watching him closely today. The older man sternly warned Kane to be careful with his words when the parents introduced their daughters, and the young man looked surprised and slightly tense. The young man insisted that he was already engaged to the princess and Miss Silk, while those present explained that polygamy among the nobility in this country was common practice. The goateed man reminded Kane again to choose his words carefully when introducing his daughters, and the young man again looked slightly worried. Despite his confidence in his engagement to the princess in silk, the group again explained that polygamy was widespread among the nobility in their state. Telia insisted that Tellies in silk were enough for her, but Kane explained that her noble title would inevitably attract many people seeking profitable connections, regardless of her betrothal. The young man nodded gravely in response to his father's warning, promising to be careful as the carriage waited nearby under the city arch. At the formal reception, the young woman expressed her gratitude to Lord Eric for his recent assistance, and Lord Garm politely returned her greeting, acknowledging her consideration. In a spacious and elegant room, the man introduced his third son, Kane, with dignity to the group, including the Baron and the hero Kane, expressing his joy at meeting them. After this, Eric von Santana introduced himself and thanked the young man for saving Silk, then added his hope that in the future they would find common ground and become friends. Silk responded with a grateful smile, introducing herself and expressing her gratitude for the rescue she had received. Kane politely complimented Sylvia, noting that her dress suited her beautifully and that she was beautiful enough for a queen, but he doubted whether such a compliment was appropriate for a 10-year-old girl. Telia happily asked if Kane really meant what he said, and he confidently assured her that he did. A young man remarked that Kane had a spirited sister, and another adult warned that being able to handle women at 10 years old could lead to future problems, while the girl listened nearby. They discussed how he had learned to cope with her temper and decided to continue the conversation later as more and more guests arrived, demanding greetings and attention. At a large reception, the young man confidently announced that he was with Duke Eric and asked where the other had learned to speak so well, while the footsteps of Kane were heard approaching them. The boy admitted to watching others' faces to figure out what to say, explaining that he knows how to avoid unwanted consequences, and two adults noted his unusual maturity for a 10-year-old. His father warned Kane to be careful with his words, and then suggested that he go greet the rest of the nobles as they entered a large hall full of guests and a noisy atmosphere. The king stood majestically in his ceremonial robes, next to two women, and a young man and two men watched him from some distance, while a crowd gathered below the hall. Everyone in the hall listened attentively as the young man expressed his gratitude for the guests having traveled a long way from different parts of the kingdom to come to the reception. The figure spoke to a group of children gathered in the hall, explaining that they would soon become the pillars of their country and bring prosperity to their native land. The king raised his glass from the balcony in a toast to the future of his children, and the crowd below cheered in support of his words. After this, each noble family held a personal meeting with the king, and then the young man informed the boy that the king was ready to receive him and it was time to go. The castle was visible in the distance, and the young man admitted to himself that he was very nervous, but he gathered his courage, deciding to ask an important question while he was there. Kane and the young boy knelt before the throne, expressing gratitude for the invitation and congratulations to Princess Telia, who sat next to the majestic figure. The man motioned for Kane to greet Telia, and the youth nodded, while the king expressed his pleasure at their presence and hoped they had a good time at the reception. Millie was embarrassed when Kane complimented her beauty, noting that she looked like a goddess descended from heaven and literally took his breath away. The king angrily pointed out to Garm his son's actions towards the princess, and Garm and the young man reacted with surprise and irritation, while the princess stood nearby, looking down in embarrassment. Kane addressed the princess with respect, declaring that he had brought a gift, and she, sitting on the throne, asked what exactly he wanted to talk about. At this point, the king, sitting thoughtfully, received the scroll after permission to retrieve it from the magical vault, while the request was expressed respectfully from the balcony. Kane knelt down and presented the reversi board to the monarch, explaining that it was a recreational product developed in collaboration with Saracen prior to its public release. The young man agreed to wait for the summons, hoping that the meeting would only concern the game, but the king insisted that a detailed explanation be postponed until the end of the reception. The man asked Kane when he started in business, and he explained that after receiving a noble title, he wanted to add value to his name, so he approached Saracen to develop a product. The young man explained that they had entered into an agreement. Others would handle production and organization, and he would profit from the initial idea, admitting that he had no understanding of manufacturing or marketing. He enthusiastically explained that he had prepared other boards for the whole family, and the older man, wiping sweat from his brow, reflected on the young man's unexpected skill and his current role as an entrepreneur. Kane advised the young man to choose a suitable title and be responsible, after which he noted that he would go discuss matters with other families, leaving him alone. In the Great Hall, the children gathered in groups reflecting their parents' unions, and one boy explained that this was because they had inherited their parents' titles. He added that the houses of the marquises like von Silford remain neutral without factions, emphasizing the duty to guard the borders and the inevitability of wars with neighbors, as he had been explained earlier. Silk happily asked Kane if he had come alone, and the woman offered to have a conversation, since Tellys was still with His Highness. Kane happily agreed to meet with Silk. He was surprised by the large crowd, then expressed relief that she was there, and she admitted that she had not had the opportunity to be alone with Telia. Kane smiled awkwardly, asking Silk not to call him Lord Kane, noting that such formality was unnecessary between them. The girl cheerfully suggested calling him Baron Kane, and he agreed with a smile as they settled together on the elegant sofa. Kane insisted that everything was fine, while the two men greeted Silk mockingly, saying that she didn't look too good today, standing with an air of importance in the spacious room. Millie enthusiastically recognized Lord Habit, but he received a cold reception from the lady, who politely withdrew, leaving Millie slightly surprised by her dismissive attitude. Gain angrily addressed someone off stage, demanding how dare they, while Kane and Telia sat nearby and the young man was distracted, wondering if they were addressing him. The three young men clearly reprimanded the blonde man for not greeting Lord Habit, the heir of the Marquis of Galgino, and the blonde man listened in surprise when he heard Galgino's name. Gain angrily reproached Kane for rudely interrupting Lord Habit's conversation with Silk, and the young man dropped his cup in surprise, freezing in place. The two men exchanged serious glances as Kane politely greeted Lord Habit and began to introduce himself, while the young woman and boy sat quietly on the nearby ornate sofa. The young man corrected the blonde with obvious sternness, emphasizing that the correct title was Lord Habit, not Sir Habit, reminding him of his noble status as the son of a baron. The two young men insisted on being addressed as lords, as they were the sons of viscounts, and the boy wondered why they thought he was the son of a baron. The girl remarked that perhaps they had misunderstood Silk's words. Kane boldly offered to the others that if they apologized now, he would be generous and forget what had happened, noticing the worry on Silpha's face as the others watched tensely. The young man politely asked the seated girl to reintroduce herself, while two other boys stood behind him, one of whom remarked that the interruption was impolite. Garm introduced himself as Marquis Garm von Silford, Gracia's third son, and the three boys addressed him as Baron Kane von Silford, which was confirmed with a short okay. The young man confidently declared that he was a baron, not a baron's son, and the men behind him widened their eyes and gaped in shock. He admitted that he was to inherit his father's title, but stressed that it did not matter at the moment, explaining that the rank was low, despite his father's full status as a baron. The two men discussed how the Marquis and Marquis von Silford actually occupied the same level, after which one of them realized that he had grabbed the collar of a nobleman who was both the son of a marquis and a baron. The three boys suddenly turned around and ran away quickly, explaining that they urgently needed to do other things, while the others watched them go in surprise. Gain looked confused and annoyed, trying to figure out what they wanted now, and Telia quietly chuckled nearby. Kane expressed displeasure with the whole, whose child is whose situation. In the spacious hall, she recalled how Kane had pestered Sir Habit, and then unexpectedly offered to buy his silence with a date, which surprised the young man. Telia exclaimed joyfully, and Kane noted with a smile that this would be a pleasure and a pleasant surprise for him. Rain admitted he could handle the job, but doubted he could defeat Silk, while Telia cheerfully suggested informing her father for planning, leaving him a little stumped by the 10-year-old's determination. Millie called out excitedly to Kane and Silk as a group of children, and one woman watched them curiously in the decorated hall. She greeted Telia with joy, and Telia expressed relief that the meetings were over while a group of people remained in the back of the room. Two characters reproached Kane for talking to Silk all the time, and the girl pouted, outraged by the injustice. The girl began to mention Kane, but he abruptly interrupted her, with surprise and insistence demanding that she stop immediately. The blonde girl excitedly declared that the key to the game was to touch the lips of an unmarried woman, while the young man and the other girl listened intently. A close-up showed the girl calling out to Lord Kane. Telia anxiously begged to be forgiven, insisting that she must report to Lord Eric, reaching out to someone off-camera, her expression betraying her worry. She continued to anxiously ask Kane to tell her honestly what was going on between him and the other person, but the young man nervously denied any events, trying not to show his emotions. Millie excitedly announced that she and Kane were planning a date, which left Telia shocked and jealous. She wondered when Millie had stopped calling Kane Lord and cried out about the injustice. The girl complained that everything was unfair and wanted to go on a date too, while the young man listened silently, surprised and speechless. He expressed disbelief at what was happening and suggested arranging a date with Telia, to which she joyfully exclaimed that she was looking forward to it and was very happy. The king acknowledged that the time had come for a private conversation, and the young man received this with a mixture of surprise and slight alarm. Cain felt slightly nervous when the older man reminded him to explain the game, but he figured the conversation would be educational for both parties. The young man winced in pain and admitted that if he were an ordinary child, he would have cried, and the elder in the crown agreed to follow his example. The king explained that although the rules of the game were simple to understand, mastering it required skill. There were already several black and white pieces on the board. Cain explained that he had set the price at 1 silver coin for the public and a more luxurious version for the nobility at 1 large silver coin, hoping to create a game that would be fun for both children and adults, which the other man thought was reasonable. The castle stood majestically under a partly cloudy sky when a voice suggested playing another game, and perhaps another after that. Cain politely asked to be released, but someone shouted at him to wait, creating a tense pause in the elegant room where several people were gathered. The king insisted on discussing what had happened earlier, and the nobleman smiled, recalling the conversation about how they were going to take their daughters on a date. The young man asked with slight anxiety to explain what was happening, while the group assured him that there was enough time to hear his explanation, with the castle visible in the background. A few days after the celebration, he regularly visited the Saracen company, walking along a quiet street where 2 women stood near the entrance to the building. The girl enthusiastically told the man that she had shown Reversi to the king and that he had liked the game, which surprised everyone she had told him about it. A man in a crown expressed admiration for the game's popularity, mentioning that Duke Eric and the king himself often play it, while another explained that the inexpensive version had sold out and production had been expanded. Cain apologized for being late, and the older man with the letter from His Majesty greeted him warmly, saying that he had been awaiting his arrival. The young man carefully read the letter from Rex, which contained a map and key to the property given to him, realized that he had forgotten about the gift, and began to think about preparing for the move. The young man, holding the paper in his hands, asked in surprise if this was the place, standing in front of a large fenced mansion covered with green vines. They stopped in front of the impressive mansion, amazed by its size and slightly anxious at the thought of living there alone, while one of them held the key and hesitated before opening the door. Cain noticed a huge lamp and then showed a glowing ball, explaining that the magical crystals that fed the light had exhausted their energy. The young man confidently raised his hand to the ceiling and then smiled, declaring that he could now see everything clearly and distinctly. Standing in the doorway, Cain thoughtfully asked how many rooms there were, admitting that the house seemed too spacious for him alone. He looked out from the balcony and noticed that the building was heavily damaged, warning that it was dangerous to walk on, comparing it to a haunted house. Cain activated the magic circle and stated that they would clean and repair the building to restore it to its former beauty. The stage opened with a view of a majestic mansion surrounded by a neatly trimmed garden and blooming roses, whose petals gently fell to the ground, creating a peaceful atmosphere. The young man confidently decided to select furniture to match the style of the house, and then agreed that this was enough for now, demonstrating the elegant interior of the room. A week later, Cain arrived at his new mansion and apologized for the wait as a group gathered in front of him, including Sylph, Telia, Sylvia, Millie, and Gain. Cain assured her that he had everything in his box of things, and the woman reminded him not to forget anything, standing calmly nearby. The man turned to Cain, saying that he had a gift as a baron, and the other added that he could come at any time as long as he remained in the capital. The young man noticed the new carriage and exclaimed in surprise, recognizing that it was indeed a new carriage. The young man thanked his father for the gift and promised to use it. His father answered in the affirmative, and then he opened the door and looked at him before leaving. The older man remarked that the baron should not walk everywhere and should behave accordingly, to which the younger man agreed before they began preparing to leave the mansion. A large carriage pulled up to the gates of the estate, and several maids and servants waited at the entrance, ready to greet the guests and escort them inside. Karana introduced himself as the new butler to Cain, mentioning Uncle Seabass, who serves Cain's father, as they approached him at the large building. The man in the suit approached Cain, expressing his joy and willingness to work after hearing that Silford was hiring, and the young man listened attentively. Millie gratefully thanked Sylvia for accepting her request and coming, and Sylvia warmly replied that it was always her responsibility to take care of her, even without being asked. Millie happily agreed, and Kane cheerfully said that he would see Sylvia soon. The girl expressed a desire to explore the mansion, and the young man enthusiastically invited them in, offering to begin the tour. The group gazed around the great hall in admiration. One girl remarked delightedly that everything looked brand new, while another recalled her visit when the place belonged to the Viscount and noted that it looked very different then. Two maids were discussing how the house remained spotlessly clean despite not having been used for several years, wondering at the lack of anything to clean it. The young man smiled confidently and explained that he had used magic to repair the house, which was in such a dilapidated state that it resembled an abandoned place, unfit for habitation. The fair-haired boy continued to smile confidently, while the dark-haired man remarked that he sometimes forgot that he was no ordinary child. The man in the suit asked the two maids how they managed to clean the entire house. Inside the building, Telia offered to show someone around, standing at the counter while Kane leaned relaxed nearby. Then the scene changed to a spacious library and a simple, well-lit room. The younger one asked the older one's opinion, who replied that the place was nice, but it lacked paintings and decorations, which aroused the young man's interest. The man noted that aristocrats usually collected paintings and stuffed monsters, then added that the boy was only 10 years old and was unlikely to have had time to create a collection, and Kane listened in surprise. Kane was delighted to be able to use monsters and decided to try it at the entrance while the girls were climbing the stairs. One of them announced that she would be practicing magic. Sitting cross-legged on the floor, Kane considered placing something tall to fill the large empty space in the main hall. The young boy excitedly told his father that he had placed a powerful monster in the hallway, and his father agreed to check it later, standing with him in the spacious corridor. Suddenly they heard a scream from the corridor. Kane shouted that the sound was coming from here and suggested they run forward, and the other character agreed. Kane ran quickly down the corridor with his sword drawn, then looked out anxiously over the balcony, noticing two frightened maids below, startled by the sudden noise. A furious roar of a dragon suddenly rang out in the huge hall, and two small silhouettes stood at its feet, looking up with delight and apprehension. Kane admitted with surprise that he probably should have warned them, and the other man urgently asked what had happened. The young man nervously explained that he had hung the decorations while standing near the huge dragon in the main hall, while another man listened intently from the balcony. Kane answered the call a little nervously, while two adults and three maids watched him anxiously. Then someone outside the mansion asked if he was ready to live alone, and he promised to do his best. A red dragon appeared, and the group remembered that it had previously only been defeated by the combined efforts of the strongest adventurers from different countries. The young man was amazed and puzzled, wondering how it was possible that a 10-year-old child could handle the creature alone. Kane firmly told Kane that they would discuss how he killed the dragon later, and Kane nodded quietly, standing in front of the large, fallen dragon in the hall. A man in an aristocratic suit explained to the young blonde that the creature before them was an S-rank dragon, simultaneously deadly and amazingly beautiful. Kane explained that selling the scales alone could fetch 1,000 platinum coins, and the young boy exclaimed in amazement that this was the equivalent of 10 billion yen. The man suggested leaving everything as is, explaining that thanks to this, the young baron would be able to arrange a housewarming earlier than expected, which surprised Kane himself. Kane reminded Kane that as a new nobleman with a new mansion, he had to show it off, and Kane sheepishly admitted that he had never encountered anything like it before. The man explained to the young baron that the mansion, decorations, servants and guests would be carefully assessed by other nobles, and all responsibility for the organization fell on him, which surprised the boy. The huge dragon angrily demanded a break while two smaller figures stood below, one with his arms crossed, the other clutching his head in despair. Karana sat down on the sofa, mentioning the upcoming housewarming, and the man in the dark suit standing next to him confirmed that he was aware of the events. Kane warned that no mistakes could be made, and the man in the suit explained that the purpose of the event was to show off to the nobles and make a good impression in the new home. The young man expressed irritation at the difficulty of the task, and the blond man doubted that there were many nobles in the capital, wondering whether the Baron would invite someone of such high rank as the Duke. Cain gratefully accepted Gain's offer to meet with his uncle and draw up an invitation list, admitting that it was a real salvation for him. The young man excitedly asked Karan about the details of the party preparations, and he happily agreed to help, ready for any questions. A few days later, Cain looked over the long list of nobles, amazed at their number, and the narration explained that he had invited Duke Eric and Chancellor Magna, as the king avoided events for lesser nobles. While sitting on the sofa, Cain was called by a man in a suit who informed him that a message had arrived from the king requesting a meeting, which greatly surprised him. They walked down a decorated corridor. Then the young man carefully opened the door and asked who was there, trying to understand the purpose of the visit, while the maid stood motionless nearby. The young man wondered why the king, the advisor, and the nobleman were gathered together, standing tensely before them in the luxurious room. Cain was greeted by a woman who mentioned that she had heard about his planned party, but noted that she herself had not received an invitation, pointing out that he had invited Eric and Magna. The young lady was surprised, asking questions about the reason, while the older man with the crown insisted on understanding what was going on. The king inquired why Telia and he had not been invited, and the youth remarked that Eric and his daughter were present. Then the monarch asked irritably if he would like to meet his future father-in-law. The king insisted on being understood, and the young man nervously explained that Eric had shown him the invitation, while the older man calmly sipped his tea. Cain listened intently as the man with wavy hair calmly explained that the Baron would not have invited the king to a normal celebration, but perhaps allowed Cain to attend because he seemed promising. The older man admitted that he was the young Baron's father-in-law, but the younger insisted that their engagement was still kept secret, so there was no reason to invite him publicly. The young man approached the king, explaining that he had decided to deliver the message in person, holding up the scroll in his hands and emphasizing that he had the monarch's response right there. The elder nobleman responded to the young man's words with joy, firmly squeezing his shoulders and expressing pride and inspiration. The king enthusiastically handed the invitation to the young baron, who sheepishly explained that it was his own invitation. The monarch confidently declared that he would bring his daughter, and the other man present nodded in agreement. Outside, by the massive door, the young man sighed deeply, feeling relief and thinking how lucky he was that Karana had given him an extra invitation. He heartily thanked the one who had saved him earlier, and received in response an exclamation of surprise, which only increased his feeling of gratitude. The servants and attendants were amazed and delighted to learn that the king and the third princess would be coming to the party, and that she was engaged to one of those present. Cain addressed the crowd, explaining that the news had not yet been officially announced, but that they could keep it a secret and give everyone a grand surprise. The young man vigorously ordered the servants and attendants to begin preparations, and they responded unanimously, ready to begin work immediately. He looked closely at the list that Karana had given him, thinking that most of the items could be purchased from the Sarakan company, and with the help of magic, something special could be created. The Baron recalled the high-quality Venetian glass from his past life and noted that the nobles here preferred silverware, as other glass was of poor quality and oddly colored. Telia enthusiastically recounted how in her past, glassware had sparkled and one could drink from it, and she immediately decided that now it was necessary to act to arrange a festive table. The young man cheerfully raised the decorated glass, then looked at several similar ones and realized he needed many more, deciding to act quickly. The servant screamed when she spotted Cain lying unconscious among the broken glasses, and her reaction was one of shock and panic. Millie woke up on the floor, surprising Sylvia, who anxiously explained that she had noticed the light and rushed inside, fearing the girl might be hurt. Cain settled down on the sofa and explained that he had used all his magic to create a multitude of exquisite glasses, which were neatly arranged on the table in front of him. The girl called Cain by name, and he thought that he had underestimated the magical effort needed to create something from nothing, and regretted that he had not found a more efficient way to make all the glasses. She consoled the young baron, noting that she understood his desire to throw a magnificent party, but reminded him that they had all come to support him. The boy nodded gratefully to Sylvia, promising to remember her help, and she cheerfully assured him that he should not cope with difficulties alone and could always count on her, even without magic. Within a few days, the dishes were prepared according to the guest list, and the chefs received detailed instructions from the confident young man on how to prepare various dishes. 3 months flew by unnoticed, and by the time the celebration began, everything was completely ready in the luxurious mansion. The young man noticed a crowd gathered outside the door and thought that although about 100 invitations had been sent out, it seemed that even more guests had arrived. His name was called outside, and then one of the servants announced that Duke Eric was ready to meet him. Kane nodded and agreed to go at once. Eric greeted the Duke warmly, expressing his excitement for the upcoming housewarming party, and the Duke thanked him for the invitation when they met near the carriage. The young man chuckled, teasing the girl about the king's nervous reaction and how the promise to go first angered Minister Magna, to which she smiled, noting that without such moments a housewarming would not be a housewarming. The young man warned the girl not to be afraid of the porcelain dragon in the hallway, and then they headed together to the large door, remembering his reminder. Kane cheerfully invited everyone to follow him, adding that he was looking forward to meeting the dragon, while Telia and the other young man walked silently behind. Kane, Sylph, and Telia found themselves facing a roaring dragon in a massive hall, while Millie and Sylvia watched anxiously from the foreground, the tension growing as the creature spread its wings. The Baron remarked that nothing could surprise him anymore after the first hall. Then Telia joyfully exclaimed that she would live here in the future, and Kane added that the place looked different before. Kane admitted that everything was happening too quickly, and Kane nodded in agreement. The servant informed Kane that the greetings to the guests would begin, and he nodded in understanding as the girl waved goodbye to the boy in the hallway. The young man thanked everyone for taking the time to come, and then expressed his gratitude to the king for conferring the title of Baron and providing the mansion for the celebration. Kane raised his glass and invited everyone to enjoy sake with their meal, eliciting a joyful cry of kanpai from the assembled group. One of the guests admired the unrivaled taste of the drink, and the woman admired the elegant glass and noted that she had never seen anything like it, while the others present watched in silence. The guest praised Kane's attention to detail in the table setting, and the young Baron happily agreed, noting that everyone seemed to be enjoying themselves while the other guests enjoyed the company. The narrator explained that it was difficult to find better ingredients than those of the nobles of this world, so the Baron chose dishes from his previous world to surprise others. Kane tried one of the dishes for the first time and found it delicious, while Telia watched him with surprise and curiosity. The man, with a confident smile, showed the decorated glass to the young Baron, asking his opinion and the possibility of purchasing several such glasses from him. The man offered a couple of glasses as a gift, and the young man politely thanked him, after which the older man pointed to look at something nearby. The two girls smiled warmly, and one teased the other, noting that Lane also loved food more than romance. The king raised his hand to quiet the crowd, asking everyone to continue communicating as before, while a young girl and a man watched nearby. The monarch introduced the young hero who had saved him, Telestia, explaining that he had insisted on his visit, and asked the guests to enjoy the holiday without worrying about them. The young man apologized to the king for any possible inconvenience, but the monarch only smiled and said that today he was the main event, while the girl quietly watched them at the table. The servant handed the king a glass of drink, and the monarch looked at him curiously, asking what kind of drink it was, and the servant politely confirmed that it was his drink. The king expressed satisfaction with the first serve and asked how Telia liked it, who listened silently and nodded in agreement. Telia happily remarked that the food was delicious, and the woman standing next to her gently pointed to the sauce at the corner of her mouth. Kane smiled softly, finding it endearing. At this time, the carriage stopped in front of a small building, and someone persistently demanded an explanation from Kane, while another guest noted in surprise how modest the building looked. The older man questioned why Baron Kane was boasting about such a petty kennel, claiming it was a paltry achievement, and the young man quietly agreed, adding that it was nothing compared to their mansion. Suddenly the young man announced that he needed to step away for a moment, and the other quietly addressed him to get his attention by saying his name. Suddenly the young man remembered that he had invited the Marquis of Corsino, who had screamed throughout the corridor, while the young baron called him anxiously, trying to calm him down. The baron apologized to the Marquis for not seeing the guests out, but the Marquis, in a rage, demanded an explanation, trying to understand what was going on. The young man reflected on how surprised the others were and felt a little guilty as one man criticized the lack of artistry on the red dragon they had hunted near Gracia, calling it typical village approach. The young man informed the elder that the guests had already arrived and offered to escort him to the hall, while the other enthusiastically urged him to hurry, since many famous people were already here. Millie felt ignored despite the visit of the royal family, Duke Eric and Minister Magna, and noticed two men running down the hallway, one confidently declaring that important guests should arrive last. Several nobles whispered about the baron's impolite behavior despite the king's arrival, but he drank calmly and paid no attention to the whispers in his direction. At the table, the young man explained that the drink did not contain alcohol and was intended for toasts, while the older man with a mustache frowned, declaring that he already knew all the drinks that the barons prepared. The little boy enthusiastically told his father that the food was excellent, and his father, holding a glass, was amazed at the quality of the sake and clearly enjoyed the taste. Kane looked on in surprise as the man demanded a glass, his sake reserves and recipes. The guest then sampled the drink and admitted that he liked it. The young baron considered this request excessive and firmly refused, to which the older man tensed up and looked displeased. The guest insisted on 100 glasses instead of 2, but the young man offered only a couple as a souvenir for today's visit. The man with horns declared that the Marquis's respect would increase thanks to such a glass, but the baron apologized and said that he could not fulfill the request, even if the interlocutor was a Marquis. The seated man angrily asked the young baron why he had not obeyed the older aristocrat, and the others present in the room were astonished at the baron's insolence. The man sternly demanded silence, insisting that junior nobles should obey their elders, and at the same time asking whether this was an act of dominance. The girl with the crown standing nearby asked in confusion whether it was appropriate to speak like that in front of the lord, while the man in the hat watched silently. The man with the mustache was nervously wondering what the king might say, while the monarch stood confidently and the young man listened quietly with his eyes closed. The crowned man asked again if this was too much to say to another lord, and the man with the curled hair wondered anxiously what the king would say while the fair-haired youth remained silent. Meanwhile, the nervous guest asked why the king had come to the house of a lowly baron, while the monarch stood calmly and the young man watched from behind. The king noted that it was natural to favor the one who saved his daughter Telia, and the bowing man acknowledged the monarch's rightness, but was reprimanded for his overbearing behavior. The king warned him to reconsider his future actions if he continued in this manner, and the man bowed deeply, apologizing and admitting that he was impressed by the quality of the glass and the food. The monarch approved of him and ordered him to become an example to other marquises, while the confident young nobleman watched the scene from a short distance. In another part of the room, a man nervously remembered an urgent matter and abruptly informed Gabbett that he was going home, while the others watched from afar. The man in a hurry raised his hand, apologizing to Baron Kane and explaining that he had remembered the emergency, while someone off camera shouted at his father, asking him to wait. Kane sighed with relief, thinking that everything had been resolved well, and in the background, servants carried trays. Suddenly, his expression changed to shock. The man quickly asked Lena what was wrong, while the king and the other young man looked worried and Lena nervously wondered if she had made another mistake. Telia pointed to the toilet in surprise and asked what kind of device it was, after which the two men admired its irrigation and drying functions with interest. The young man explained that the toilet was equipped with a bidet based on a magical prototype stone, and the crowned figure admitted that he didn't fully understand how it worked and wanted to try it out for himself. The king ordered Kane to install such a device in the castle the next day, emphasizing its importance, and the girl enthusiastically agreed that the same should be done in their house. The event passed without any major incidents, and the young man expressed gratitude to his father for all the help he had provided. He admitted that without his father's support the day would not have been a success, and the elder only smiled, stating that it was natural, after all, he was his son, while the servants prepared for the next event nearby. The man firmly told the boy that from now on he was an independent nobleman, separated from the Silford family, and must solve problems on his own, to which the boy quietly agreed. Cain assured his father that he would rely on his own strength and thanked him for his concern, while the adult expressed more concern about possible fatigue than about his inability to cope with the problems. The event was held to the delight of all present, but there remained a slight worry that the commotion might lead to trouble similar to the incident with the Marquis of Corsino. The young man reflected on the need to be careful when introducing knowledge from another world into this world, demonstrating a serious and focused look. The next day the castle was visible from afar, and someone mentioned the need to come to install a new toilet and bring special glassware. He walked slowly down the long corridor, thinking that today he could act leisurely, and at the same time he remembered how the king called for help from a lower nobleman when he approached a massive door. The young man informed the seated queen that the installation was complete, and she invited him to come closer, offering him some tea. The monarch offered a price of 1 platinum coin, warning that this might not be enough. The young man was surprised, declaring that this was more than enough, and the king added that they would soon discuss the price of the glass. The adult explained that the dragon at the main entrance required mastery of magic and fencing to keep it safe, and the young man was surprised to agree and wanted to start with that. The king insisted that it would be a waste to let him go and declared that the youth should join the training of the imperial knights and mages at court, which greatly surprised him. The boy was worried because he was only 10 years old, doubting whether he could cope, and the monarch noted that irritation was visible on his face, while the young man observed how strong the imperial knights were. The king offered access to the mage's library, noting that it contained rare books, which surprised the young man, who remembered that he had never seen materials on high-level magic at home. The figure stood before a huge whirlwind of fire, explaining that he could cast a superclass spell without a book, just by understanding the principle, but the creation of other elements was impossible, only with the use of additional magical power. Cain happily said that he could develop magic by reading books from the library, and the king noted with a smile that he quickly changed his mind, surprised by the boy's words. A young man asked the king for help registering a monster he had defeated, explaining that he kept it in an item box because he was unable to register as an adventurer. The monarch promised to help if possible. He asked if it was possible to sell monster materials in the castle, and the elder replied that they were ready to accept them. Millie breathed a sigh of relief, and the king explained that the royal family would primarily benefit. The adult added that the materials could be used for distribution or research, and that goblin-level items were not needed. The young man explained that the items were stored in his box and could be retrieved at any time, and the woman suggested that they contact the Imperial Knight's warehouse for storage. The king expressed a desire to play Reversi today, but the adult reminded him of the meeting and the limited time, so the monarch agreed to reschedule the game with Cain for another day. After their conversation, the young man advised her to go to the Imperial Guard's headquarters, and she gratefully agreed against the backdrop of the castle and the clear sky. Cain greeted Dame after a long time, but he modestly refused the title of Hero Commander, claiming that he had not done anything special. Cain opened the door confidently, turning to the young man next to him, explaining that he had heard everything from Minister Magnus' servant as they walked down the corridor. He asked if the room was suitable for storing monsters, but Millie doubted that there would be enough space for all their needs. Cain asked if the threat was another Red Dragon-class monster, to which Cain confidently replied that it was only a 6-meter Earth Dragon, much smaller. He asked if such Earth Dragons required a group of A-rank adventurers to kill them, and Cain admitted that he was not an adventurer, but understood that it was still a dragon. Cain then offered to take them outside temporarily, explaining that the knights would deal with them later, and one of those present noted the growing mystery in Cain's behavior. After this, the young man calmly activated the item box, announcing that he was going to retrieve the necessary items. Millie breathed a sigh of relief, glad that Cain had helped by taking the dragons off of himself, while Cain doubted that he could have handled the powerful A-rank Earth Dragons on his own. Cain asked with a smile whether his interlocutor was a hero or an apostle of God, causing an unexpected reaction and tension in the young man. After a short pause, Cain decided not to delve into the matter, and the third son of Marquis Garm explained his humble position, all the while beaming with a bright smile. Meanwhile, the young swordsman stood confidently, surrounded by a group of knights in armor with raised swords, ready to clash in the spacious courtyard. The adult introduced the hero Baron Cain to the group, mentioning stories of orcs, and announced that Cain would be joining the training today, causing mixed reactions from those listening. Cain asked if the Imperial Knights would accept a 10-year-old boy, and Cain confidently told the boy to get started, suggesting that they begin with training. Cain then motioned for Cain to strike first and ordered him to go, while the youth prepared himself by activating the enhancement before the duel began. Cain rushed at the armed man with a sword, who, surprised, tried to repel the attack. Cain swiftly struck down the heavily armored foe, who admitted defeat with a pained expression while the others watched in amazement. Cain admitted that he did not expect to be defeated by a high-class Kingsguard, and then offered to fight 30 at once, which surprised the young man and those present. Cain asked if they were really going to continue, and the other one in armor replied that it was time to begin, as a group of armed soldiers had lined up behind them. A lone figure stood among numerous knights with drawn swords, while the narration reflected the tension of the scene. Cain took a fighting stance with his sword, ready to act regardless of the situation, and a group of knights demanded an explanation of what was happening. The soldiers quickly turned to the commander, who stood confidently with a sword, and the young man wondered if this was really the commander they were looking for. Sylvia asked if everything was all right, then harshly criticized why the group was circling around and pointing swords at the child, pointing out the lack of pride as guards. Sylph gently hugged Telia, asking if she had been scared among the frightening people, and assured her that everything was calm now that she was nearby. Sylvia knelt down and asked the boy about his parents, asking if he was lost, while Millie quickly asked why he hadn't stopped them when he had the chance. The young man reacted with surprise, doubting whether the child in question could be Baron Cain, while another character confirmed that the hero previously mentioned was indeed him. The elf smiled confidently, then challenged the young man, acknowledging him as a hero and demanding a mock battle, which greatly surprised him. The man then asked the commander to introduce herself first, and she confidently explained that swordsmen must communicate and understand each other through their blades. The soldiers discussed the commander's habit of challenging strong opponents to mock duels when they walked together near the castle. Baron Cain stood confidently before the group, while those standing nearby wondered if the leader was really called the Holy Sword and whether it was possible that Cain. Meanwhile, Telia rushed forward, shouting that she was coming, and Cain warned her to wait, since his sword was wooden, but she confidently replied that her dull blade would not cause problems. Cain and Telia engaged in a fast-paced sword duel, and she warned that Cain's magically crafted wooden sword might break when parried. Sylvia called out to Baron Cain, who had taken a fighting stance with his sword, admitting that she had let her guard down a little, thinking of him as a child. Sylph declared that she would fight seriously from now on and charged at Cain with determination, while he braced himself, carefully gripping his sword. Cain and Sylph clashed in a furious battle while the others watched with alarm. At one point, Cain's blade broke, surprising him, and Sylph prepared to strike again. The crowd watched in disbelief as Cain and Sylph moved quickly, and someone noticed that Cain was now even faster than the commander. Cain activated his accelerated thinking, preparing to fight off the flying opponent, surprised at how quickly the other participant was approaching. He charged at Sylph, who barely managed to block the blow, then crouched and prepared for his next maneuver, realizing that he had been blinded during the collision. Millie was surprised at first, then focused, and Cain admitted with alarm that he had acted thoughtlessly, realizing that the situation was serious. The young man was amazed when his interlocutor introduced herself as Tefana von Rebelt. Sylph decisively proposed marriage to Cain, which caused him surprise and slight embarrassment. Tefana confidently introduced herself as the daughter of the Knight Commander and an elf who would live to be over 300 years old. The young man objected to the marriage and his age, to which she nodded thoughtfully. The blonde girl looked tired, while the elf asked if that had convinced him completely. She explained that she had come to the capital in search of a strong man and had finally met him, standing confidently with a sword in front of the young man. The young man insisted that she should first consult with her family, doubting that she would be able to make a decision about marriage on her own as the daughter of a duke, and she listened silently with a serious expression. Sylph confidently explained that she had already told her family that she would not return until she found a husband, and assured them that everything would be fine if she reported this. Cain remained silent, and the young man admitted that he still had doubts and wanted to discuss the matter with others, including his father, to sort out the troubling situation. Afterwards, they discussed the difficulty of making decisions alone, and one suggested talking to His Majesty first, while the other, a little nervously, agreed, acknowledging the woman's understanding despite her insistence. The young man reacted with concern, saying that it was indeed a problem, while the older man with the crown expressed reluctance to involve the king in the matter. The woman instructed Daimu to arrange an audience with His Majesty, and the young man looked at her in surprise, after which Daimu nodded in understanding, slightly worried. Cain looked apologetic as a worried youth called out to Daim, a serious woman standing behind them. Then the scene shifted to a lavish hallway where quick reservations were impossible. The king asked why he was there after returning from urgent business, and the young man confirmed that everything was as planned. The items were stored in the knight's warehouse. The girl urgently called upon His Majesty and declared her desire to marry Baron Cain, surprising the young man next to her and attracting the attention of the seated nobleman. The king asked Cain to tell everything from the beginning, and the elf asked why this happened, and Cain began to explain until the scene changed to the exterior of the castle. The king confirmed his victory over the strongest commander of the Imperial Knights, and the girl with light green hair enthusiastically agreed, while the young man next to him looked tired. The king asked Cain if he had mentioned Teles and Sylph to her, and he replied that he had not yet, as it was confidential. The king, sitting with the two men, expressed surprise that Cain had become her rival, admitting that he had expected the commander to marry a stronger girl. Behind bars, two elves revealed that Ribald was once a country ruled by elves, often subject to kidnappings and slavery, but was now protected as one of their territories. The king explained that although the territory was guarded, it operated autonomously, and therefore, despite her status as a duke's daughter, she could be both commander and princess while another claimant courted her. The king informed Tifana that Cain was secretly engaged to Telestia, the daughter of Duke Eric, and then asked Cain what he intended to do upon hearing this news. The girl with light green hair clenched her fist and said that knowing that he was recognized as king and Duke Eric made her desire to marry him stronger, which surprised the blonde man next to her. The king acknowledged the young woman's feelings, reacting calmly as she stood near the table, and the young man listened attentively nearby. The king ordered that a letter be sent to his father first and said that the matter could be discussed after receiving permission. The young man agreed to immediately set out his thoughts in a letter. The young man hoped that the conversation would end soon, as it seemed incredible to him that a princess and a 10-year-old child could become partners, feeling that the discussion was going too smoothly and was unlikely to be accepted. The king apologized for his sudden demand while Sylph and Gain stood nearby. He asked if they should continue the conversation, and after the youth tried to leave, he reluctantly agreed to stay. The older man suggested that they needed to discuss some matters, and the young man, about to leave the room, hesitated and reluctantly agreed. The king explained that she had the highest level of swordsmanship and the blessing of the god of war, making her the strongest knight and the appointed commander, and everyone present in the room listened attentively. The young man suggested that Commander Tifana's health might not be in the best condition. Then the woman asked if he understood what she was trying to convey. The king asked who he was, and Cain introduced himself as the third son of Graham, after which the king thoughtfully said that he would ask Cain one question. The older man asked the younger man if he intended to harm the country, to which he replied that he had no such intentions, looking surprised and worried. The young man explained that he wanted to do everything possible for the country and did not wish harm to anyone, while acknowledging that the king had made him a baron and recognized him as the fiancé of Princess Telia and Miss Silk. The king confirmed his consent, and the advisor assured him that he trusted the words of the young man, who sat nervously on the rich sofa. Cain felt uneasy and decided that he had to report everything to his father, planning to stop by the mansion on his way home while a group of nobles discussed business in a luxurious room. Daim inquired about the fight between the commander and Cain, and the armored man explained that the commander initially relied on physical enhancements, but then switched to wind magic and accelerated sword techniques after Cain whispered something to her. Suddenly, Cain surpassed the commander's speed, attacking instantly, and at that moment the duel was over. The king reflected with annoyance on being defeated by a 10-year-old child, wondering where he got such strength from. The man in the aristocratic suit confirmed that the child had been leaving his room at night since he was young to train and hunt monsters in the demon forest, and another asked him for his opinion. The dragon remembered how he trembled when he saw someone alone deal with the red dragon in the corridor. The young man approached the seated king and reminded him of the matter they had discussed earlier, and the king then thoughtfully explained that an SS-class monster, especially if it was a child, could not be defeated alone. The king was shocked by the question about Cain's identity, but he remained calm while the other man explained that Cain's body reacted momentarily when he was asked whether he was a hero or an apostle of God. In a spacious room, the man excitedly admitted that he had asked Cain to show his status, but felt that something was wrong, so another suggested that the king show it to Cain himself. The king thought that the demonstration of the object might reveal who the hero was, and immediately ordered Cain to be summoned. The servant immediately agreed. The king again considered checking the hero's status by displaying an item, and again ordered Cain to be summoned, to which the servant immediately responded. The youth wondered if something had happened when the courtier informed Cain that his majesty was summoning him. Then the king asked Cain to look at the object and ordered Magna to bring it. Telia carefully studied the ancient imperial spellbook and asked to see the magic, noting that it was the magic of the first king, kept in the royal family. The king allowed the young man to look at the book, and he thanked him with delight, holding a sheet of paper with notes in his hands. The young man enthusiastically discovered a new type of magic in the book, and the king sitting opposite him understandingly confirmed his guesses and expectations. After this, the king told Cain that they were not allowed to read this book and asked if he knew the reason, at which point the young man looked surprised and puzzled. Cain began to flip through the pages, at first not noticing anything special, but then suddenly became frightened and amazed by what he saw. The older man with the crown explained that the book left behind by the first king was written in Japanese and called the Book of the Emperor of Magic, but no one could read it. Telia clarified that the language of the world is not Japanese, and since Cain came from Japan, he is probably the only one who can read the book. The man warned the young man that his status could pose a threat and lead to attempts at control by the country, advising him not to show others his mistakes. The king, wearing a crown and a fur-collared robe, firmly told Cain that he would ask the question again, and the young man listened attentively, sitting opposite him. The older man with the crown demanded to know who the young man really was, and he looked surprised and slightly worried. Cain said that in another world he died, but here he found the warmth of a family and met many people who amazed him with magic and made his life joyful. The young man was worried that he would no longer be able to deceive them and wondered if he would lose everything if he revealed his true identity while sitting with the three others in the decorated room. He promised to tell the truth and added that the conversation should remain confidential to those present, while a serious group, including the king, listened attentively. The young man confidently stated that he was Graham's child, but also revealed that he remembered life in another world, placing his hand on an ancient book during his explanation. The group sat tensely around the table, and one man expressed doubt as to whether the child was really theirs, wondering at his memories from another life, even though he was only 10 years old. The imposing figure asked if anyone had ever met God, and the young man nervously admitted that he had seen all 7 gods during a baptism in the church, which surprised the older man. The king asked if the young man had hidden his status from Brahm, and he confirmed that he could not reveal his titles, abilities, and blessings. The king asked if they could reveal their status there, promising to keep the secret, and the young man agreed, and the group sat around a round table in a decorated room. Cain's stats and titles were displayed in detail, and the surrounding men reacted with shock and surprise at his immense power and blessings. Cain revealed that he had not only been reborn, but had also received powers from the gods, after which the others discussed the impossibility of the existence of blessings above the 5th level. The king sternly asked Cain how true what he had written was, and the young man listened silently, preparing to give an answer. The young man stood confidently as a large crowd bowed before him. One declared that the whole country should bow, while another asserted that even the whole world should submit. The king confirmed his status as a monarch, and the young man was amazed. Then the king explained that the apostles of God have a much higher position, illustrating this with a majestic ladder reaching into the sky. Cain pondered the potential threat of God's superior apostle, realizing that it could change history dramatically. Meanwhile, the scene showed a formal address to His Majesty, and a man with his eyes closed and his hands folded in prayer noted that the feeling that people were worshipping him as a messenger of God was like control, which he sincerely did not desire. The young man realized that being a superior apostle could pose a serious threat to God, wondering how it could change the course of events, and he quietly acknowledged this understanding. The scene changed to a group of people bowing and praying, while one explained that being perceived as a messenger of God felt like control, and another quietly repeated that he didn't want that. The boy asked to be treated simply as Graham's 10-year-old son, expressing a desire to live an ordinary life, and the king gratefully accepted his request. Someone called out Cain's name as he confidently fought against several armed opponents, and the voice remarked that everything he had done so far was beyond the ordinary level. The king asked the young man if he was willing to support the country if it faced trouble, having a serious conversation about the future. The young baron declared his loyalty to the kingdom of Isford and his determination to protect Princess Telestia, Miss Silk, and his family, adding that he must be careful not to overstep his bounds. The king explained to the baron that normally he would have immediately promoted him to duke, but now he planned to gradually assign the title of marquis so as not to arouse suspicion, since there was already interference from outside. Someone firmly warned that he would not forgive anyone who revealed their conversation, even relatives, and asked if everyone understood. The young man apologized to his father for his silence, and his father, after listening to his explanation of his status, accepted the situation with sadness but understanding. The man sitting next to him apologized to the young baron, admitting that he had not realized the seriousness of the situation, despite the fact that it was his child. A month after the secret was revealed, Millie happily showed off the document while Cain was negotiating with a nobleman about a game, and a wedding photo was nearby. Suddenly, Sylvia jumped on Cain, startling him greatly, while the two girls watched in amazement. The young man noted that despite his worries, his life remained unchanged. Cain studied the book carefully in the quiet, richly furnished room, explaining that only he could read it, as it was written in Japanese, and thanks to this everything was open. The book contained explanations of magic and the diary of Yuji Tera Hirasawa, the first king of Isford, who believed he was summoned to this world after an accident. The story told of the first king who traveled with his adventurer friends to discover the source of the world's dangerous air, and then became a hero who founded his own kingdom. Cain sat at the massive table in the library, wondering if there was anyone else who had been reincarnated or transported to this world besides himself. Around a large round table, several figures discussed the young man's strength. One explained that even 10th-level blessings were insufficient, and the youth needed to become stronger. Gain expressed doubt about the need for such power from Aaron, and the older man confirmed this, warning that the seal was about to be broken, at which moment Aaron mysteriously appeared in a hood. In the throne room, the king explained that he could not interfere in the underworld, so they decided to turn to Cain for help. The worried woman agreed that releasing Aaron would bring problems. Someone noted that 300 years ago the damage was minimal because the threat was quickly sealed, and then wondered what would happen this time. Telia stated that with Aaron's resurrection, the fertile land would once again fall into chaos, and decided that this needed to be stopped, after which she suggested inviting him to the church to strengthen the protection. The man with the long beard reflected that the boy's training should begin at the age of 12, and the scene moved to the forest, where a suitable mentor was supposed to be found. At a round table, the council discussed a worthy candidate. Then the woman suggested that the young man train under the guidance of a certain person, while the man sat thoughtfully by the window. Cain adjusted his glove as the maid cheerfully reminded him that today was finally his 12th birthday, to which he responded enthusiastically. The young man happily declared that he would finally register as an adventurer, and the maid wondered why he was doing so in the guild, noting that he could trade materials through the castle and avoid guild quests. The man explained to Sylvia his desire to use the guild to meet all kinds of people as they stood on a busy street under a cloudy sky and tall buildings. A group of people, including a young man, approached and entered a large, decorated building when someone expressed a desire to see a world they did not yet know. 2 years passed in the capital, and the narrator finally reached the age to register as an adventurer. The young man explained that although the Gracia Territory Guild was large, the capital city guild operated on a completely different level. Millie welcomed the newcomer to the main building of the capital's Adventurers Guild, noting that this was his first visit. A young boy excitedly told the woman at the counter that he had just turned 12 and was registering as an adventurer, and she asked what brought him there today. The girl pointed to a bookshelf, and the boy stood behind the counter. She noticed the adventurer's register, to which he enthusiastically agreed. The young man was surprised to see an adventurer registration form, and then the glove handed him a document and asked him to fill out the necessary information. Kane thought that he didn't want to get into trouble by registering under the name of a nobleman, so he decided to use his real name. Millie finished filling out the form describing her martial arts proficiency, then handed it to the woman behind the counter, who checked everything and confirmed it was correct, after which she assumed a serious expression. Millie asked Kane to drop a drop of blood onto the crystal to register its magic on the map, and he hesitantly prepared his finger to prick it. The young man carefully touched the glowing crystal in its exquisite case, and it flared with a bright light, filling the room with an energy that seemed almost tangible. The young man received a guild card and was told that by depositing magic into it, his name and rank would appear on the card, which caused him genuine admiration. Sylvia explained the adventurer ranking system from G to SSS, showing off cards for each level, and the boy realized that the first king must have possessed incredible power, being the only SSS. She continued to explain that there were many types of tasks, but he would mostly receive basic ones suitable for beginners. At the counter, the girl explained to the young man that the quests were posted on the notice board and asked him to take one and bring it back to the counter. They discussed the types of quests. Recurring tasks required bringing certain items, and one agreed to take on such a task, while the other suggested doing several at the same time. Millie explained that there were quests only for groups, asking that all party members be registered, and he thanked her, calling her big sister. Leisha, the receptionist at the Capital's Guild, introduced herself to Kane and asked him to address her with the respectful Kuin, to which he politely apologized. A group of rough men demanded that Kane stop wasting his time on the child and join them, but he replied that he would do his best, and the girl next to him wondered if these people were guild specialists. The muscular man angrily approached the young boy, accusing him of neglecting the older adventurers, while the girl quietly decided to step away before a conflict began. The young adventurer admitted that he had only registered that day and knew nothing, after which the older man said that he would have to teach him a good lesson, and then abruptly threw open the door. The boy recoiled in alarm as another punched him sharply in the stomach, causing him to step back in pain and surprise. The man angrily demanded that the two boys stop evading him, calling one an insolent brat, while the other, standing on top of him, demanded to know what was going on. Kane let out a sharp cry, and Millie immediately identified the enemy as the Icefire clan. Both of them braced themselves for a confrontation, feeling the tension. Kane confidently offered to play the role of the opponent, but the other man only smirked and snorted dismissively. The children ran screaming to get out of there, and Kane told the impudent brat that they would get what they deserved later. Then Millie thanked him for saving her, to which he modestly replied that he did it for them. Claude introduced himself to Kane along with his wife Lena, and the young man responded politely, while Claude asked his name with a friendly smile. The young man inquired about the Icefire in question, and the man explained that they were using the place as a base and offered to help if needed, to which the young man politely thanked him. Claude explained that their party was called Icefire, he a master of fire sword magic, and Lena specialized in ice magic. Their name corresponded to their elemental specialization as adventurers. Inside the Grand Hall, someone remarked on Kane's impressive preparation and flawless dodging, emphasizing that it required a lot of training, addressing him with respect. Millie supported the young blonde man, who spoke about his studies in fencing and magic, expressing his desire to become an adventurer, and she wished him luck in ranking. Gain asked the young man if he was going to take on the quest, and he enthusiastically confirmed it, after which the girl explained that all the tasks had already been posted on the notice board. Gain explained to Kane that quests required specific ranks and advised him to start with one suitable for his G rank, noting that G rank and F rank quests were available to him. They noticed a repeatable quest to hunt goblins and wolves in the eastern forest nearby with an unlimited reward of large bronze coins and decided to try it first. Gain asked if Kane had found a suitable quest, and he enthusiastically confirmed it. Then Sylph wished him caution on his journey, and the other man thanked him for everything. The young warrior confidently drew his sword and ordered an immediate move to the eastern forest, showing determination and readiness for action. The young man reached the eastern forest and decided to first go to a place with a high concentration of magic, carefully preparing for the search. He was carefully watching the goblin camp hidden in the forest and suddenly took a step forward, which startled the goblins and caused them to panic. A young warrior encountered a group of goblin-like creatures and decided to thin their numbers with magic, using a cutting air spell to hit multiple enemies at once. The young man knelt down next to the defeated goblins, explaining the rule about having to bring proof of the monster's defeat, and wondering whether he should take their magic stones, even though he didn't like it. Kane, having collected all the bags, wiped his brow in relief, then crushed a group of monsters with a powerful attack and finally knelt down to pray in a quiet forest clearing. The young man found himself among the green lizards, wondering if the scent of goblin blood had attracted them, wondering if there was a G-rank quest for these creatures, and whether he could defeat them. The young warrior created a bright glowing ball surrounded by roaring dinosaurs and called for immediate action, surprising them with a sudden glow. He cast the ice rain spell, creating sharp ice spikes around himself, then sighed in relief and considered which part of the green lizard to take as evidence before deciding to return it and check. Millie greeted Kane warmly as he approached, and he responded by addressing her as Leisha, while two people walked calmly past in the background of the room. Kane informed the girl at the counter that he had defeated the goblins on the repeatable quest and encountered the green lizards, but was unsure what exactly to bring, after which she praised him for his good work. Millie explained that green lizards were rated D alone and C in a group, emphasizing that they only posed a threat to parties of average adventurers, and the surprised onlooker reacted loudly. She expressed relief that Kane was okay and warned that if the enemy had called his group, he would not have survived, and the young man was amazed at their unexpected strength compared to the goblins. The man asked what all the fuss was about, and the woman explained that they had been discussing the boy's encounter with the green lizard and his safety, after which the young man agreed to take care of the goblin ears. Millie noted that she had 30 green lizards and asked where to put them, while the other two silently watched the bag of wriggling creatures. The young man was urgently called into the reception area, causing him to turn around in surprise, while the rest of the room watched closely what was happening. Cedric introduced himself as the guild leader and asked Kane where he got the goblin ears, to which Kane explained that he had discovered and defeated the goblin camp and then brought the ears here. Kane sternly demanded the truth about what happened, promising to forgive the childish prank if he confessed honestly, but he doubted that the child could defeat so many enemies, including the green lizards. The stern man told the silver-haired boy with irritation that lying was against the law, and he silently claimed that he had already told everything, doubting that an adult would be able to understand him. The man firmly declared that the guild card would be revoked, causing the young man to panic and shout that he only wanted to become an adventurer, understanding the seriousness of the situation. The girl asked what the noise was and asked everyone to wait a minute, while a voice from the corridor threatened to deprive the card, causing shock, after which the door handle was turned. Sylvia asked about the reason for the scream, and then someone called out to the guild master, who was standing nearby with a serious expression. The older man told the young elf that a child named Kane had just registered as an adventurer while they were sitting together in the room. Kane explained that he had caught someone doing something wrong and was asking questions, while the other realized that it was their first meeting. Eden introduced himself as the guild master, reporting that a new member had brought a whole bag of goblin ears and claimed to have defeated the green lizards on the day of his registration. The bag of carrots was named Cedric, then Sylph responded silently, and another man angrily insisted that it was impossible for a 12-year-old to do so, while the boy vehemently defended his words. Hein asked if their side had any evidence, and Sylph thoughtfully noted that it seemed that the young man was the one who did not fully understand the situation. The elf asked the sweating man how he was going to take responsibility if that was the truth, and he looked worried and concerned. A clenched fist expressed irritation, after which one man questioned whether revoking a guild card without proof would violate the guild's rules. While in the distance, an attentive woman listened to what was happening.